I will rise now and go about the city in the streets and Broadway's I seek him whom my soul loveth. Went over the sea. What did I find? 1,000 crystal towers, 100 emerald cities, and the hand of the watchman in the night sky points to my beloved, a knight in crystal armor. And I tried to hold him. I tried for the queen. I'll make a suit of colors, stop the blinding mirrors, sew a cape of rainbow, stifle up the beam with the perfect armor, with the perfect dream to believe in miracles. When two suns are shining, the battle becomes blinded to believing miracles. But we're light, 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 light. With two suns spinning at two different speeds, was born a hot white diamond burning through the rainbow. Things fell into orbit to hold eternally. Two heavenly spirits that just wouldn't see.
Happy Sunday, everyone. Hey, Miley, Jamie, Helen, happy thoughts. Share a thought for Helen, happy thoughts, guys. She's going through a tough time right now. So, send her your thoughts. Happy thoughts. Yeah, Sundays are underrated, I've always thought. I don't like this whole winding down thing at the end of the week. We must rail against such things. I think I am at risk of getting high on Lemsip. Is that possible? I'm trying my best to get through this damn flu. Cool, Jamie. Red Eye Jedi. Good evening to you. How are you? Mr. Sunshine is here. That's an interesting emoji you managed to use there, Red Eye. Do you know I finally figured out? I don't know if anyone else has found it annoying, this stupid heart that's at the bottom of the live chat in a lot of chats that you go in, which makes it, which obscures the last comment. I only just figured out how to turn that off. So, winning at life. It's the small things, isn't it? So I thought we'd have a freewheeling kind of live. I did. Yeah, yeah. That was the only way to get rid of it, because it's goddamn annoying. Do we really need to see hearts floating up to the top of the screen? I don't think so. So yeah, I thought we'd have a freewheeling kind of live here, see what happens. Um, I've been covering a few true crime cases lately. Obviously the Adelsons case there the other day. If anyone would like to talk about that, come on panel, or if anyone has any questions, that'd be cool. Sarah Boone. I've got Sarah Boone's latest letter, which I'm going to show you guys and read out. Shanda van der Ark. I've got a lot to say on that case. And I covered Joel Hollendorfer, for any of you guys that's seen that recently. Could talk about that. Or see what happens. Is that what it is, Red Eye? YouTube trying to be like Instagram. I guess in this nanny society we live in, people need to feel loved all the time with hearts and smiley faces constantly, right? The Hamstead case is one that gets you. Is this a recent case? Oh yeah, the Crumley trial. You're allowed to use the hearts and smiley faces, Helen, because because you're happy thoughts. So you get a pass. You're the exception. Yeah. So the school shooter, Nathan Crumley, right, is going to trial. I've not followed it. I know a little bit about the case. Um, Obviously his parents are being held liable, I guess, for allowing him to possess the firearm. And apparently there was a whole bunch of red flags that should have been noticed there. I think Carmen the Chaos has covered that case. I think she knows a good bit about it. So the Hamstead case is about 10 years old. Ricky Dearman in the Satanic Church. That sounds like a doozy. I'm embroiled in the Adelsons case right now. I do think we have some good news, though, in reference to Sarah Boone. I do not think there's going to be any more continuances at least. I think that's one thing that can be gleaned from her letter. Hey, Welsh lady, it's always great to see you in here. The Scientology rabbit hole. Wow, that's a rabbit hole one may never escape from, though, Helen. I know you're deep in there. It does explain why Tom Cruise is so weird. This might sound cynical, but I'm always highly suspicious of people that are that happy. It's not normal. Well, we can help you escape, Helen. Texas challenging the government. Could you expound on that? Helen's been trying to escape the Scientology rabbit hole. It's been years. Yeah, I mean, give it time. It'll pass. Well, if it's great, then you don't want to be out the rabbit hole. If it's entertaining, so shall we talk about Sarah Boone? Why not? I've had this letter for a few days, but I only read it there earlier today. I came across there was some other YouTube channel, some other true crime channel read out this letter, and it was so cynically read out, annoyingly read out. I mean, obviously Sarah Boone is not very popular, but I think some people tend to forget the whole concept of innocent until proven guilty. Just that little niggle. Cheryl's here. Yeah, just for clarity, everyone, Helen's not actually in Scientology. She thinks they're fucking mental. But it's highly entertaining to observe, with all condolences to those that have suffered through the experience. I mean, how any adult that hasn't been born into Scientology can end up following and taking serious a pseudo religion that is based on a science fiction writer um, who, correct me if I'm wrong, Helen, but is it not based on aliens in some way? And I think you were telling me John Travolta is still entrenched. So you got Tom Cruise, John Travolta. Like, Tom Cruise is a great actor, right? He's great in certain movies, as is John Travolta. But it's hard not to think that they're a little insane. Wasn't Kirstie Alley in Scientology as well? But they don't find that out until they're way down the line and hundreds of thousands of dollars in. But you'd think they'd run a few Google checks at the beginning. Kirstie Alley is still balls deep, is she? Wasn't she great in Cheers? Yeah, but they're not allowed. They're not allowed to Google shit. But there's a process whereby they must make the decision to get into it, right? Where you would think they would run a few Google checks and check out the whole L. Ron Hubbard alien stuff. Oh, did she? Did she pass away? Helen, you are supposed to be an expert on this. You're letting down the team. R.I.P. to Kirsty. I mean, I really feel for the people that are born into it. You know, the kids that clearly um, are indoctrinated from birth, essentially. There's been so much publicity about the craziness of it. So, who are the the celebrities at the pinnacle of the pyramid of Scientology now? Tom Cruise, John Travolta. Is there anyone else we should know about? Off topic, is that a new letter from Sarah? It is, Cheryl. It is indeed. And I think it's actually good news because I think there's a new judge in this case, and he has confirmed there will be no more continuances. So we're looking at May. Let's set that in stone. I was beginning to think I might retire from YouTube before it ever goes to trial, but things are looking up. I'm sure he is. He's Tom Cruise is a god in his own mind to himself. Okay, let's have a look at this. So this was January the 19th, 2024. And as I say, I heard another YouTuber read this out the other day with such cynicism and sarcasm, and which is only excusable if you're presuming her guilt in this. Um, in my opinion, Sarah has every right to be pissed off and has every right to fight her corner. She has a constitutional right to be present for some of the pre-trial conferences that she's not been at. She has a constitutional right to see the discovery which she's not seen. And she has a constitutional right to have communication with our attorneys. Okay, so she's addressed this to the Honourable Judge Cranick. Finally, she says, and Sarah's allowed to be sarcastic and sassy? Finally, a new judge. It's strange how the Lord works, as I was in the process of trying to disqualify Judge Wooten after being the judge for 4 years and me still incarcerated with nothing to show, other than 7 different attorneys, not by choice. News clips of me walking in and out of the courtroom and everything relative to my care permitted to be slathered on the global internet and in which I have not seen myself. She's now been inside for 4 years, guys. I felt he was the ticket holder to my overly hyped, illicitly distributed, misconstrued criminal case, and great reason I am still here again, ongoing 4 years and 7 attorneys later, not by choice. See my letter dated the 29th of June 2023 on the clerk's website. While still waiting to properly elucidate the court, public, and the world after whatever the dysfunction was in the attendance part of my most recent pre-trial conference states hearing, which I am trying to ensure my automatic attendance futuristically. Please see my draft motion included. I am still trying to have my attorney submit on my behalf. I wanted to bring to your judicial attention the following information so you and the world are aware it is not I who am ever delaying trial, as Judge Wooten inappropriately accused me of doing in a past hearing, especially now you have mandated a trial date to be had in May, with no further continuances. Thank the Lord, which leaves less than 4 months to put together and complete what should and could have been done already. What happened in all the 4 years prior? Today, now she's talking about her new attorney, Winston E. Hobson, which is a court-appointed attorney. I think he's quite elderly, like her previous attorney. So he has been her court-appointed attorney for 133 days and counting. Today, he has only met with me one time for a total of 3 hours in November last year. To date, no phone calls have been received by Mr. Hobson, as his phone does not work properly for further immediate, much needed communication to be made between client and attorney. So, people that have been following this case and have seen some of the letters from Sarah, it's the same thing all over again here. Now, clearly, Sarah is someone difficult to work with. I think that's an easy assumption to make. But what is going on? She's either not being treated right, or there's issues that we don't know about that's causing her attorneys to not want to deal with her. But she does have that right. Today, I have mailed 5 letters to Mr. Hobson, trying to communicate my urgent need to speak to him. Today, I sent 1 letter to the investigator in my case to contact Hobson to contact me and see if he can assist in correcting the phone problem. Also, to inquire when anyone is coming. Today I feel I am not being included or heard or cared about in my case again from the continued miscommunication again with Mr. Hobson and time-consuming, undiscussed entries are being made on my behalf. The continuance I did not know about, the waiver of appearance I did not know about, along with other documents, and I am never sent copies of anything filed so that I know. I keep trying to tell him about with no response, furthering the already massive dysfunction in my 4-year case. Hey Lisa, no, she's got an attorney, a court appointed attorney. This is who she's moaning about here. Betsy Martin says Sarah Boone did not want him to die. A drunken prank went wrong. Well, that's what I've been emphasizing. Red Eye does not agree. This is an interesting case because it's not often you get quite a. I don't know if it's quite 50-50, but there's a definite split in people's um, opinions on this case. Cheryl says, wash, rinse, repeat with her. What is going on, though, with her attorneys? Is this all because of issues that we don't know about regarding her being so difficult to deal with? What was it last time, Cheryl, on the poll? Hey, Hybrid. Oh, Hybrid, I covered, I did an introduction to the Adelsons the other day. If you're free, if you want to come up and talk about that case, I'd love to do that. I know it's short notice, but I'll throw the link in here once I get through this letter. Helen says because I'm wrong. Well, no, you're wrong. And Cheryl's wrong. Well, yeah, Calm in the Chaos. I mean, you have to assume that Sarah's difficult to work with, right? Clearly. But that should not really matter. I mean, she's hardly lying about the lack of communication she's been getting from the attorneys. Hybrid says, look at the treatment of Boone versus Kohlberger. Do you have to commit heinous crimes to get attention? Huh. Okay, cool. Awesome, Hybrid. Yeah, I'll throw the link in once I get through this letter, and you can just pop up whenever you're free. Sarah is a lot, but she's not on trial for her personality. She's on trial for murder, and she did not murder her boyfriend. She just didn't, guys. She's not firing the attorneys though, Lisa. They're departing, shall we say, murder. Cheryl says, but it doesn't matter if she is difficult to represent. How do they expect them to plan a defense? But according to Sarah, like we're just making that assumption based on what we know of her personality from the footage that we've seen, right? But according to Sarah in her letters, she is trying to work with the attorneys, but they're not communicating. Right, according to Sarah, we don't even know how factual the things she says is. Well, that's true. We don't know. We can't know. But she has been consistent, Cheryl, throughout her entire communication. Okay, where was I? Where did I get to? Okay, I was hoping in the pre-trial. Yeah, I read that bit. I was hoping in the pre-trial conference status hearing on Tuesday, I could at least play catch up in the courtroom for 5 minutes, so many of my attorneys have done prior, including Mr. Hobson in the one court case. Sorry, the one court date. I've had a continuance of a continuance to express and emphasize the need for him to communicate and schedule a second very overdue meeting. I still have not even heard from Mr. Hobson about our missed hearing. What's the status? Today, 1 out of 133 days in counting, attorney and his client have met. To date, 3 out of now 3,192 hours, attorney and client have discussed partial general case information. To date, I still have not seen my discovery. I mean, what do you think about that? She's not even seen the discovery after 4 years. Your Honour, when is the next status hearing, please? Especially since we were not at the last hearing, and especially since I am trying to communicate with my attorney in more than one way to fully maximize and utilize the minute amount of time allowed before trial. My fair, appropriate, lawful trial? Question mark. I still am wondering why, though, I've had to wait for 4 years for something to finally happen in my case. Ask Judge Wooten. I wonder also, was I the oldest case on his docket? Question mark. Either way, I'm still here, waiting patiently and very excited to get this highly anticipated show on the road. I await your overdue and very needed judicial direction, supervision, and intervention. Thank you in advance, Judge Kranick. Welcome. Sincerely, Sarah Boone. Is this out of order? Oh, no, I've read that. Ah, hold on. Okay, so this is her draft motion. It's a motion to be included and allowed admittance to the hearings. This is not really worth going through, to be honest. She's really just she's summarized all the points in here in that letter I read out anyway. So well, Cheryl, has she really accused all 7 attorneys though? Maybe 2 or 3, right? To be fair. And I grant you, she is a problem. Most likely, she's got to be extremely hard to deal with. But that's their job. Their job is to deal with her. I think we can all agree on that, Helen, that she shouldn't have zipped him in the suitcase. Calm the Chaos says, I was going to email you about this, Rabid, but did you see that shit show of the end of day 2 of Jennifer Crumbly's trial, the mom of the Michigan school shooter? Yeah, I mentioned this earlier. Someone brought it up, Tracy, and I was saying that you've looked into this case. I know a little bit about it, regarding Nathan and the fact that the parents are being judged to be liable to some extent. I did, Helen, and you answered. You're all over it. So what happened then? Because I've not seen anything of Jennifer's trial. Red Eye Jedi. Does anyone think she's a sociopath? Sarah Boone? No, no, she's not. She's a bit of a narcissist and she's a bit of an asshole, but she's not a sociopath. I presume you're asking about Sarah Boone. I do not think she's lovely, Helen. I think she's innocent of murder. Don't you think it's great, guys, that we can have such open conflict and not well, not conflict, but disparity of opinion and not cry about it on YouTube? It's nice, isn't it? Tracy says the defense attorney Shannon Smith lost her shit at the end, acting like a 12-year-old, and it was an unprofessional crescendo into complete chaos. Wow. Tracy Helen's suggesting that Rabid thinks Sarah Boone is lovely. Hey, Laurie. How many lawyers has Sarah Boone fired so far? It's crazy. Judge needs to smash that gavel and get on with it. I don't think she's fired any lawyers, as far as I'm aware. I think they've all essentially fired her. No, I do not, Tracy. No, no, no. It's not murder, though, Helen. That's the problem. There is going to come a time after the verdict where one of us is going to be rather gloating. Red Eye says, I think she's an extremely good liar and very manipulative. Yes, very narcissistic for sure. Hmm. I don't know if she's that great a liar, but I agree she's narcissistic. I think she has little princess syndrome, and there's a lot of problems through her. I know some people throw their eyes in the air when you mention people's backgrounds and upbringing and childhood and all that, but it's just a fact. It's almost always relevant, and she'd certainly had a difficult upbringing. Um, will you though, Helen? Will you? I'm not so sure. No, you won't. But you're never going to find out because it's going to be the other way around. Tinkerbell syndrome. I like that. Prone to throwing tantrums if she doesn't get her way. Sounds like my ex, to be fair. Are you male or female, Red Eye? Yeah, yeah, you've piqued my interest as well, Tracy, on that. Cheryl says, well, one thing at this rate, regardless of what the verdict is, she probably won't serve much time because she'll have time served. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be over. It'll be getting close to 4.5 years time served. You're a man, baby. There's just so much true crime to cover at the same time, Tracy. You know, I'd love to dive into that one, but then I'll be worried that I'll distract myself from all the other cases that I'm struggling to cover. You should cover it though, Tracy. Even if you just pre-record something and put it out. I'll put the panel link in chat, guys. Because I think hybrid was gonna come up when she's free, and I'll pin it so that she'll see it. There we go. Are you familiar with the Adelsons case, Tracy? Because if you enjoy some interesting testimony and back and forths, then that is a cornucopia. I do try, Helen. Yeah, yeah. Sleep well. Sleep is always the best medicine. You didn't keep up with the Adelsons. See, I didn't pay much attention to it for years, because this goes back to 2014 when Dan Markel was killed, and the police interview with his ex-wife Wendy was up on YouTube for a long time. I don't know if the whole 5 hours was up, but there was certainly a good portion of her interview up on YouTube, and I remember seeing that. I think that was quite widely seen, and it was very interesting. I mean, there's a lot of strangeness in and around that interview, but I didn't notice much about it in the interim. But then things have moved pretty quickly in the last 2 years or so, and there's now been 3 trials being processed, and 5 out of the 7 characters that are involved potentially in this murder are now sitting in either jail or prison. I guess only Donna's in jail waiting trial. Donna is the grandmother of the kids of Dan and Wendy. The rest of them are in prison. So only Wendy and the grandfather, Harvey, are breathing free air right now. But especially in the case of Wendy, not for too long, I don't think. No way. You serious, miss? Shut the fuck up. Here's Cheryl.
Hello. I can't wait for hybrid to come up. I started listening to your live the other night, and I did what I figured I would do is I accidentally fell asleep, but I did hear about an hour and a half of it. So
Okay, so you've got a kind of a basic
yeah,
kind of
I have
knowledge
the
of it
base.
now.
Yeah, I have the basics. Plus, last week's Dateline was about that story.
Oh, was
So
it?
I got an of course it's abbreviated when it's only, a 2-hour show. So, but yeah, I have the basics of it, but I am interested to hear a lot more.
Yeah, I mean it's one of these cases where there's so much to it. It can be kind of overwhelming trying to even cover it. There's so much stuff that I just didn't get into in the
Yeah.
live the other night because
Yeah.
you just can't, right? So obviously I'm going to start getting into it more and more, but hopefully that was a good introduction to the basics
Mm-hmm.
of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm stoked that Hybrid's going to be able to come up soon because I know
Yeah.
she's followed this really closely. How about you? I mean, is there any, just from listening from the other night, is there anything kind of on your mind, any sort of questions or anything you're
No,
unclear about it?
well, not a lot of questions. The only thing that, just from what you showed, and I have watched that uh, police video with her. It's not an interrogation; it's a questioning.
Mm.
I don't know. I don't know if they're going to be able to charge her. I unless there's something we don't know from everything that I've seen, which isn't a lot. That's why I'm excited about Hybrid because she probably knows a lot more. But I don't know if they'll have enough. That doesn't mean that I think that she's innocent. It's just
Yeah.
I don't see legally unless like her mom or her brother or someone turns on her and they have something that they
Yeah.
could turn in. But
Well, it's a
I'll,
good
I'll,
point. It's a very good point because if she is involved in this, she has been so much more on the ball and clever about covering her tracks and
right,
not saying too much.
right.
I don't know how closely she was being monitored at the time, and by 2016, her brother Charlie and her mother Donna were being listened to. You know,
Mm-hmm.
their calls were being listened to. They were being followed. They were being filmed. Um, Charlie with his girlfriend Katie in a restaurant were filmed, and this all led to them being convicted in the end. I don't know how closely they were
I
tracking
mean,
Wendy.
my guess, and it's totally just a guess, that they probably were monitoring her. She just didn't give them anything. She
Yeah,
didn't give them anything. So that's why we're not hearing about any tapes or anything because she was smart enough to
yeah.
not say anything. Like I said, I mean, my gut tells me, of course, she probably, is guilty to some degree, but I don't know if they're going to have enough to ever charge her, let alone convict her.
It's possible. I mean, someone mentioned in the other live, could this end up being an Alfred plea? Which I hate Alfred pleas just in general. I think it was
Mm-hmm.
Dana maybe that mentioned that. Because you are right, there is definitely evidence that's quite damning regarding Wendy, but it's not so far from what we know on the same scale as what they had for Charlie and Donna. Now, Donna was obviously just recently arrested at the airport, and they
Right.
took her devices from her. And Donna and Harvey were extremely reluctant to give them their phones. Well, I don't know if Harvey gave his phone. I don't know if he was actually arrested or not, but
No, he
Donna
wasn't.
did, right?
He
Right.
wasn't.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there could be something from that, but to what you said earlier, there's a huge chance that Charlie could turn on Wendy, especially once Donna is convicted. He's not going to now, I don't think, right, while Donna's still to go to trial. But if he sees his mother going down as well,
Yeah.
and let's face it, they did this for her.
Right, but you also need to remember that they can't just charge someone and take them to trial based on the statements of a co-defendant, which is what it would be. They have to be able to corroborate what they say. So they have to have some sort of text messages, something. I mean, they can all spill their guts and say she came to us with this plan, she had blah 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 blah. But if the state doesn't have any evidence to prove that, if she was smart enough to not put anything in writing, not do any messages, anything like that, then there's nothing they can do with it.
Well, there is already instances where she's let things out, though, right? Like referring to the TV during the interrogation, the interview itself. stuff like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah,
There's-
but in the big scheme of things, you have to. I mean, like I said, you have to think about in a trial. Is there, the evidence with guilty by a reasonable by what is it by no reasonable doubt. So, but again, it all looks bad. But is there reasonable doubt? Of course there is. She technically could have been talking about a TV. We don't know. I just hope that there's more. I hope that there's more that they have on her. But up until now, the family just hasn't wanted to turn on her. But at some point, hopefully they will. And hopefully they do have messages. And somebody in your chat said something about Snapchat. What was that? Oh, Jamie said they can at least get her for perjury. I also think Georgia has some evidence from Wendy's Snapchat.
Oh, wow. Yeah, this is the other thing. The fact that she was given some level of immunity from testifying during Charlie's trial, which is limited, of course. If she was to perjure herself, then she can be charged for perjury.
Right.
Some people have suggested that they could just get her on perjury, right, without getting her on murder, which would be unsatisfying, right? But that's one avenue that they could go down. I think Wendy's agenda from the jump was to help plan the murder, keep her hands clean, and get rid of Donna and Charlie from her life. That would see if that was true, Jamie, it would make her the most diabolical human being.
But she kind of comes off that way, though, don't you think? I mean, that's the feeling I get. Like,
when you watch her testifying,
yeah,
it's sickening. They can see who you Snapchat with, but maybe not the actual messages. Right. And there's the fact...
Sorry, go ahead. No, go ahead.
There's the fact that she, on the actual morning before she made this ludicrous drive down Trescott when Dan had just been killed, on that morning, she texted Dan, not Dan, she texted Charlie saying, "This is so sweet," or "This is sweet." And then she deleted that message prior to even being in the interview, I think. She also had an 18-minute call with Charlie, which she, during the trial, said was just all about this TV. Talking for 18 minutes about this goddamn TV getting repaired.
That's a lot of talk about a TV. And wasn't she trying to set up? I mean, it looks like she was trying to set up the guy she was dating, but it didn't work out.
Yeah, Jeffrey Lacoste.
Yeah.
It looks very much like she was. Yeah.
So the whole diabolical thing, I mean, she's coming off that way. I'm just looking at it from a point of evidence and actually being able to convict on it.
Well, thing is, right, it's going to be almost all circumstantial. Hybrid's here.
Yeah. Yay. Hi, Hybrid.
Hey, how are you guys?
Good. How are you?
Good to see you guys.
You too. You've got an echo.
Okay.
Going on
yeah. Hold on. It's bad. Okay. Shut that. Is it gone?
Still here a little bit.
No. Okay, she'll be back.
She will.
J-May says Wendy has already pointed at Charlie and is ghosting Donna. Right. So that's what I was thinking, was that, if they have something on her, she may piss them off enough to where, they're going to turn on her. But on the other hand, maybe she's doing that because she knows they don't have anything. They can say stuff all day long, but without any evidence to corroborate it, it's just, a felon blaming somebody else.
That's true. They would need to be able to relate some kind of evidence which could be corroborated, like you say, from what
Right.
they already know.
Right. But nobody's that perfect. And with all the people, it seems that were involved in this, she had to have screwed up somewhere along the line and said something in a text message or something. I mean, the more people involved in a crime, the more chance that you're going to screw up. So keep your fingers crossed.
Let's just play a crazy hypothetical, right? And let's just imagine, I don't think anyone believes that she didn't have knowledge of this, but let's pretend she didn't have knowledge. Do you think her driving down Trescott is in any way understandable or explainable?
Driving down it? No,
Well,
not really. But even if we bypass that, the fact that, you know, the road's blocked off, crime scene, police, ambulance, whatever, her kids, as far as she's supposed to know, her kids are with him. Why is she not, why did she not even try to call him? I mean, even if her kids weren't there, just be like, call your ex and go, hey, there's someone going on your street. Just wanted to make sure it's not you or your house or whatever, you know.
yeah.
But the fact that she didn't call, so even the driving by, like I said, no, that's not normal. But even if you just kind of ignore that, the fact that she didn't reach out to him when she saw that, that was stupid. That was a mistake if she was trying to commit the perfect crime. Because I think anybody would do that, you know, unless it's absolute. I mean, I know she hated her husband, but he is still the father of her kids, right? So why would you just send a text going, hey, saw a bunch of cops on the street. Hopefully you're dead, you know, or whatever, you know. But there was nothing. I think that that was a big mistake on her part. What do you think?
I think it's just, you can't explain that away. And it's not just the fact that she drove up to the roadblock, it's the fact that she, by all accounts from what law enforcement said, she turned immediately, quicker than any other vehicle did. You know, like she was, oh shit, that kind of thing. And then, like you say, the fact that the roadblock was so close to Dan's home, the fact that it was so obvious that there was a crime taking place, the fact that she then tries to minimize it during the interview and during trial by saying, "Oh, I just thought that maybe a tree was down or something, you know, so I just turned and went about my way to get my bourbon at this liquor store, which is on the complete opposite end of town from where she was going." And then she even denied how far up the road that she went during the trial. Yeah, and then she texted Charlie saying this is so sweet and deleted it. She also deleted her reminder for the TV repair.
So wait, so J May says she often drove there to come to terms with the divorce. Who does that?
That's weird.
Right, that sounds like stalker stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I said, I personally, you know, gut feeling, she definitely was a part of this, you know, definitely. But I just don't know if they're going to be able to prove it.
Well, yeah, it's going to be a more circumstantial argument in regards to Wendy, but you can convict only on circumstantial. It's possible.
It is. But again, we're back to that beyond a reasonable doubt. I mean, common sense can, if this is all that they have, I'm saying, you know, there could be more stuff that we just don't know about because they're still investigating her, right? But if this is all that they have, I can't say it's beyond a reasonable doubt, in my opinion.
It's how much weight you put on all the bullet points of circumstantial evidence that add up. You know, you'd have to see it all as a list, essentially, because there is a lot.
Yes, and if they got testimony, especially from her mother or her brother, that would add credibility to these little small pieces of circumstantial evidence. I think.
It would do, yeah. And even things like, how on earth did the hitman know, that they had to get it done that day, that Dan was leaving the very next day? And there's also the fact that Wendy literally texted Dan not long before the murder asking if he was going to be in town.
Right.
There's
Right.
there's so many little small things like that each on their own aren't, like killer evidence, but they accumulate. The accumulation of them all is the problem. And then,
Mhm.
if there's more to come, if Charlie was to turn on her, and what is he able to bring to the table if he does turn on her? We just don't
And
know.
and again, I know you and Hybrid, and looks like Jamie too knows a lot more about this case. Is Charlie closer to the mom than she
Yeah.
is? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So
Yeah.
if the mom gets convicted and she doesn't even get charged, that may be enough to piss him off. Be like, nope, we're all going down for this. I mean, or maybe that's just my way of thinking. That's probably what I would do.
No, a lot of people are thinking the same thing, Cheryl. Because Charlie has already given a lot of indications that he's turning on Wendy already through some of the recorded phone calls between Charlie and his mother from prison.
Mm-hmm.
He's already essentially throwing blame at Wendy for his own conviction. He himself has stated how ludicrous it is that of all days, she happens to drive up Trescott Drive on that day. And he says to Donna, of course it's going to look like a plot.
Yeah. Jamie says that she has to go to a birthday party, but she'd love to come up on this case. Yeah, it sounds like you know a lot, Jamie.
Yeah, throw me an email, Jamie. And we'll see if we can arrange something.
Let me jump down since Hybrid's here. Let me jump down and see if that. Oh, wait, it's not echoing now.
Can you hear us, Hybrid?
Yeah, but it's still echoing. I don't know why it's doing this. It's me. It's not you guys. I have no idea what is wrong with this thing.
It's
me.
not echoing now for us. It's not.
But it is
Is
for
it-
you, right? Is it echoing for you, Hybrid? Oh, she's
Oh,
gone.
oh, shit.
Oh, feel for her. She's obviously got some connection issues.
Oh, Jamie says she's been obsessed with this case since 2014. So yeah, because I want to hear from people that know a lot about this.
Yeah. And just to your whole point about co-defendants turning and whether the evidence they bring is going to be of value or not. This is what happened with Katie Magbanowa, the girlfriend of Charlie. She was able to,
Exactly.
yeah, she was literally able to give, to relate circumstantial evidence, which they could corroborate.
Yeah.
The fact that the money was like stapled together, which is a very unique thing for someone to do, right? To staple their money together. This was something Charlie had always done. She was able to confirm things like the money had been washed. Donna washed the goddamn money that they delivered the next day.
So what was the point of that? To like remove like touch DNA or something? I mean,
Yeah.
I
It would have
mean,
been futile, right? You couldn't. I don't think they would be able to do it. I mean,
yeah, it's
how
like
long would that take?
I don't know. I mean, I've accidentally washed money, and half the time it rips on me. So I don't know if I would even wanted to attempt that. So,
Yeah. Yeah, Red Eye. This family is something out of a Shakespearean tale. I'm not kidding. The hubris here. Let me bring them up. This is your cast of characters.
And that's just amazing to me that there were so many people involved and they're just now able to and this happened in what, 2014, right?
Yeah.
Because we all know the more people that are involved in a crime, the more chances that someone's going to slip up, going to say something, going to talk, going to whatever.
One of the reasons I think is because the Adelsons were so well connected. They were friends with senators, friends with judges. There's a lot of criticism of one of the previous, either the lead investigator or someone that was working the case previously got a lot of criticism. And it only really, because 10 years, right? But they only really got anywhere in 2016, 2 years later, when they went undercover and performed this bump on Donna.
Yeah.
And that was their unraveling. The two least interesting characters here in this cast are the two on the right, the actual hitmen.
Murderers.
Yeah. Tuto, the guy in the bottom there, Sigfrido, is a little more interesting because he had genuine jealousy over Charlie. He was apparently madly in love with Katie Magbanawa. They had kids together. They were on and off in their relationship, and there's a sense, to some degree, he did this for Katie. Some perverted way of being her Rambo, I guess. Tato, Luis Rivera on the top, he's just a simple criminal. Charlie, the playboy, was every bit the playboy. He basically thought he was Al Pacino of the Adelson family and could resolve all problems. He was always interjecting and trying to resolve things for Wendy on behalf of Donna. Donna would refer to him as being like the magic fixer. Like at one point prior to the murder, Wendy was thinking about buying property, buying a home in Tallahassee, even though all the problems with Dan were about the fact that she wanted to move back down to South Florida with the kids, but Dan wasn't having it. And so Charlie was like, so you've just made the biggest mistake of your life by marrying Dan. Now you're going to make the second biggest mistake of your life by doing this. So he got in contact with Wendy and dissuaded her from doing that. And he was telling Donna, and Donna's like, "You're the magic fixer."
So, first off, Hybrid said if she can sort this out, we could pull up a map and I'll show everyone where everyone was positioned in South Florida. Crazy. And then Lisa asked, sorry, had to pop out. What did this lot do?
What did this lot do again? So they organized the murder of Wendy's ex-husband, Dan Markel. They had 2 kids together. They had divorced just under a year prior to the murder. It was Wendy that broke up the marriage initially. Oh yeah, thanks, Hybrid. Carl Steinbeck is someone I've watched a lot of on this case. He's really interesting to check out, guys. And the whole family despised Dan. And like I said on the previous live, trying to be as objective as possible, I think Dan probably was a bit of an asshole to Wendy. It does seem like he really wanted to destroy her. I think he was devastated at the marriage breakup. I think he would have done anything to stay with Wendy from what I gather. But so that might have played a part in him being so strong in his legal proceedings with her. And apparently, he was about to cause her even more problems in court, which might have led to her losing her actual job. So it's just fair. I think it's just fair to say that at least. But the amount of hatred and vengeance that came back from the family is obviously off the scale. And this family, with Donna at the head of it, the matriarch, literally destroyed their empire through vengeance and hatred. It's crazy. And you had the almost poetic situation of Donna trying to leave the country through the back door to Vietnam with her husband Harvey to eke out a life there, essentially in hiding, thousands of miles away from the grandkids that she went to such an extent to be with. She killed for those kids, and she ended up trying to leave through the back door to live in hiding in Vietnam. If that's not like some sort of Shakespearean narrative, I don't know what is.
Well, my guess would be it started off about the kids, but over time, it just became about the hatred. It just became about
Yeah.
not letting him win. It became less about the kids and about him not winning.
Yeah. Yeah. Just took over, right? This
Yeah.
because if you listen to her messages leading up to this murder, she's speaking like she's in charge of an army.
Mm-hmm.
It's all very fight and talk, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. So has she, I know that she was arrested. So that was like early last week, right? So they've had the arraignment already.
Yeah. Yeah, I think she's wanting a speedy trial.
So did she get bail?
No.
No?
Well,
Okay.
I don't think so.
I mean, since she was trying to flee the country, I'm assuming she would be considered a flight risk and wouldn't get it, but you never know, right?
Yeah. I just want to show the footage of her getting arrested. I played footage last time, but I didn't play the best
Okay, thank you,
camera
Hybrid.
footage.
A Hybrid said that no, she didn't get bail. And Red Eye Jedi is right. Narcissists hate losing. Yeah, that's what it comes down to.
Yeah. Okay.
Is it so? You're all into the the victimology. Victimology. What are the chances that you have 2 or 3 narcissists in one family? I mean, is that common?
I would have thought so. That's what's crazy about this to me. You've got, because don't forget, it's almost impossible that Harvey didn't know about this. He was paying a lot of money himself to Katie. He
Right.
was giving Katie, the use of a car. I think he bought her a car and things. He was aware eventually of what was going on with this bump. There's just no way he wasn't aware of what happened here. So you've got 3 people already, close family members, Charlie, Donna, Harvey, that have all been willing to be a part of this, and almost definitely Wendy. The only doubt that remains in this is just how much Wendy was a part of it and Harvey. But they are officially named as unindicted conspirators, right? That's that's their position in the eyes of the prosecution.
J May says sociopaths breed sociopaths. Yeah. I mean, from my just the little bit, again, not psychology or anything, but Wendy and her mom definitely have some, and then Charlie probably does too. I don't know much about the dad other than when I watched this video and he's kind of just standing there acting like he has no idea what's happening. I don't know much about the dad, but I'll go on mute while you play this because I think I've only seen this once.
Yeah. And that's why I called him the quiet man, because there's not a lot out there about him. Okay, I'll play this. This is the this is her arrested in the airport.
Hi, how are you? You have your ID? Oh, okay. You're under arrest. Your cell phone? No, I didn't want to give it to you. Why do I have to?
Because my attorney says not to.
Why do I have to give it to you? This is evidence. Evidence. Ma'am, she's under arrest. I have to go with. I have to go. You don't have any choice. I'm helping you. No, I have to stay. Please don't do this. You need to grab the bags. Take the bags. Yeah. And you need to wait outside. Okay.
My husband's almost 80 years old. He can't
Yeah,
come
I
with
can't.
me.
Please, can I go? No, you can't join me there. Oh, don't do this, please.
Please.
Oh,
Someone's
God.
got to help him get home. This is terrible. You can't do this. This is insane.
Is that okay with you?
Please. You don't have that with handcuffs on. She's not going to do it. Please. Please. You have anything in your pocket?
No.
Do you have anything of value in you?
No,
Plus, you have a necklace on.
What I got?
You can take it off. I'll take it.
Yeah, take it off. Yeah.
And the earrings.
And the earrings, the rings, take everything. You give it to your husband. Because once you arrive at county jail, they're gonna make you remove all that.
Can I call my attorney?
There's something quite metaphorical about that image there of Harvey taking off her necklace and her earrings or whatever, stripping her of her luxury.
You have a passport ready?
Where am I going?
Which open you think?
Where am I going?
You're going to the Dade County jail.
Dade County jail. No, this is right here, the one on top.
I'm sorry, remove your earrings. No.
1 minute.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, we'll go back.
You take it right through here.
Yeah, we'll go back out and just.
You're making a
You
mistake.
got it, okay?
It's another mistake. There's two
Do me a favor
mistakes.
and try to take it off. If you can get this off of me.
Can you take it off, please, Donna?
I don't want to hurt her.
Please,
Just a minute. Just a minute.
Please.
It's getting there. What's up, honey? Listen to me.
I'll call.
Get in an Uber, go home.
I will.
Take
I
it
will.
easy,
I will.
all right?
Yes.
Here, honey.
If there's anything else in her person that she wants.
Oh, it's coming, sweetheart. I got it's coming. Just a
All right.
second.
Do you have her driver's license by any chance?
I'm sorry?
Her driver's
It's in my
Yeah.
it's in my purse.
Yeah.
How it is.
Yeah, then you could get back.
Sure. Do
It's
you need her
almost there.
passport? Or can I give it to the husband? The passport can I give it?
What's else?
Where is it?
It's in the blue and white. It's in the blue and white.
Yeah, but I'm gonna get her driver's license first. Yeah.
And the license, the address on your license is correct?
Yes.
She needs all her, pills.
When she goes to the jail, they work in the hospital.
They're all in here though.
Yes, they work. If I take them here, what will happen is when you go there, they possibly toss them out. So when you go to there, you will meet the nurse and the doctor, and then they'll work in conjunction with the hospital to get you whatever you need.
Yeah, but I don't have a list with me. I know what's.
Driver's license?
Yes.
I have a,
Is it multiple or is just one or two?
no, there's a bag of medication in here. Is that what you're asking me?
She can take medication.
No, I know. I was just trying to find out if it was like one or two. Yeah, if it was one or two, then she maybe could take the name down.
Do you need anything else from her?
Can I ask
Or
you
we're good to
something?
go?
Can someone just get my husband outside and
So I'll get him.
There's a gentleman here with a system and
I'll be okay.
I have the ring. Hold on.
Let me have them, please. Please. No,
That's crazy.
I love you.
Okay.
All right, so I don't have the meds, honey, they're all in here.
Give me 1 moment, please. Hold on. 1 moment.
Thank you.
Yeah, hybrid. It's kind of like how they got Al Capone. They never got Al Capone for murder. You know, they got him for tax or something, didn't they? But yeah, Wendy needs to be held accountable. There is just no way she's not a part of this. The walk of disgrace.
Go out or?
That's a good question, Ethel. Will the state call Wendy's boys to testify? What Grandma said to them? Is that legal? I think they can be called to testify.
Well, how old are they now?
They're teenagers now.
Oh, well then, yeah, they can be called.
Yeah. Oh, you're welcome.
You want to take my spot? You want to move over?
Okay, I'll do that. Huh? Yeah. No, it's okay. I'm gonna leave it like that.
No, she definitely wasn't surprised. Not even upset. Like she almost half expected it.
She had apparently been talking about suicide as an option. I think prior to this, or immediately after this, probably prior. And there is a sense that this was her last ditch attempt to escape. But yeah, you couldn't say she was that surprised, right?
Nope.
This was just after Charlie was convicted, after the verdict. This happened.
Right, wasn't it like a day or two after he was convicted?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also hilarious. Donna complains cops never told her there was a warrant for her arrest. As if cops ever do that. Did she think she'd get out on bail, really?
I mean, that wouldn't surprise me if she thought that. That wouldn't surprise me one bit if she thought that.
Must be hard when you've always had your way and lived in privilege to come up against the brick wall of law enforcement. Right, pussycat.
So this one probably won't go to trial for at least a year, right? Oh, she's not waiving a speedy trial. Is that what you said? She's not?
I think she wants a speedy trial.
Okay.
That's the last I heard. And
Okay.
all the talk I hear is that, it could be a matter of months before trial.
Yeah, I don't remember what the speedy trial length is. I just know that more often than not, they waive that so the defense has time to build their case. But if she's not waiving it, then it should be soon. It'll most likely be before Sarah Boone.
It's not being continued again, Cheryl. It's definitely happening. May.
I know. Didn't the last judge said that at one point too? He wasn't. Yeah, I don't know. That one's just at the point now. It's like, you know what? I'll believe it when I see it.
Yeah. I think what I might do is place some of the actual closing argument from Georgia Kappelman in the Charlie case, because it's a fantastic closing statement, and it really summarizes everything so well. So that's Wendy in the middle there with Charlie's girlfriend Katie on the left. A few months prior to the murder down in South Florida. She had to admit she had met Katie because of this image, because of this photo, but she claims she only met her one time.
Pussycat, you disagree with what? I can't scroll up. I can't see. She lied. That was a play. That was a ploy.
Prepared to give its closing.
She wasn't going to buy a house.
A house?
Hold on. Let me find the message there that refers to the house.
Hey, Hybrid, are you still going to try to come up here?
You're welcome to try.
Yeah, because it did stop echoing right before you dropped off last time, at least for us. I don't know what it sounded like for you, but it wasn't echoing for us. So Pussycat says, no, Rivera was the key to it all. He gave them up. He took a plea. Look at it closer. Okay.
Rivero did, yeah. He was the first one to turn, and he gave the evidence during Katie McBano's. Was it during Katie's? It was either during Katie's or Charlie's, or both. But yeah, he took a proffer. But Sigfrido never has. And then finally Katie did the same thing during Charlie's case. But she did this after turning down an offer 2 or 3 times to have a minimal sentence if she just told the truth, and she never did. And she's now serving life without parole because of it. That's why she's an idiot. And Charlie's defense during his trial was so laughable. It was essentially that the 2 hitmen killed Dan because they knew that Charlie and Dan hated each other, so that they could then extort cash from Charlie in the aftermath because they would kill more of his family members because of this. But the 2 hitmen never contacted him directly through this. It was all through Katie. Even though Charlie and Katie were, as all the evidence showed through their communication, on fine terms, with loving messages back and forth, but he was trying to tell the court that she was the conduit to extort him. And that's why he got convicted in a few hours. So this is Charlie speaking to Donna in reference to the house that Wendy was apparently going to purchase. Charlie says, she never told me. Why is she doing this? She never mentions it to me on the phone. I guess it's because it's stupid. Did Danny give her permission to move, schools, etc.? This is October 2013. And then Charlie says, spoke to Wendy for 20 minutes last night. She texted me today that she's pulled the plug on the house, with smiley faces. And Donna says, wow, Charlie, thank you again. How did you accomplish that? You are a miracle worker. Tell us.
Yes, Your Honor.
You may proceed.
May it please the court. In jury selection, we talked about the burden of proof and how it was my burden to prove this case to you beyond a reasonable doubt through evidence. And generally speaking, the defense's job is to poke holes in the evidence and argue that it falls short of meeting that high burden. And we also learned at jury selection that the defense does not have to prove anything. But sometimes if the law enforcement investigation is so thorough and so compelling that there's really no way to poke holes in the evidence, he has to basically admit his own words, his own text messages. That stuff is undeniable, right? And those things prove that he was in cahoots with Catherine McBanois in 2013, through the murder in 2014, and all the way up until her arrest in October of 2016. He knows he can't deny that he paid the killers because of this bizarre practice he had of stapling his money. So sometimes when a defendant can't attack the facts or the law, they instead try to explain it away by saying, you can't trust what you're seeing. It's not what it appears to be. It's actually something else entirely. Often, as in this case, the individual explanation, so when you zoom in on one piece of evidence with its attached explanation, can be like, maybe. But when you zoom out and you add all these things together, this explanation, and this explanation, and this explanation, this coincidence, and this coincidence, and this coincidence, it starts making less and less sense. It starts being less and less reasonable. And when you zoom out from the defense's theory, it's really unreasonable, right? Because to find it reasonable, you have to buy a lot of things that he's selling. The most obvious of which is that because Sigfredo Garcia hated him, he and Rivera traveled to Tallahassee twice to kill someone he hated in hopes that he would give them money for it on the back end. Please think about that. To hit this defendant where it hurts, these two dudes with no connection at all to Dan Markel and without 2 nickels to rub together, rented a car and paid for gas to come to Tallahassee and stay in a hotel twice in order to kill someone that this defendant hated. To harm him. And for what? To maybe get money. Maybe he just turns him in for murder. Why not just kill and rob him if what you're after is money and there's no hired hit? Why not just kill and rob him if your motive is, we hate him? Then the bad guys don't even have any contact with him, according to his own story. They didn't threaten him. They did not beat him into submission. Instead, they sent his own girlfriend to extort him on their behalf. And without any actual contact from the bad guys, the defendant just opened up his safe and handed over his beloved money that he had saved his entire life since he was a child. He just handed it over. Take it all. And when that amount wasn't sufficient, these stone-cold murdering gangsters let the defendant go on a payment plan to give him the rest of the money. They let Catherine Magbanua skim off the top each month. And never, over the next 2 years that he was being extorted monthly, these gangsters, remember that money?
The guy with the grey hair in the background, that's Dan's father. He's with Dan's mother as well, just off camera.
Money doesn't go to the principal at $3,000 a month. They never show up to demand the remaining $195,000 that this defendant has agreed to pay them. Then, you also need to find reasonable that over the 2 years of this supposed extortion layaway plan, that the defendant continued to do what? Send these kissy faces and love texts to Catherine Magbanua. He's sending these messages to a woman who got him into this mess, and he says he didn't suspect she was involved. What? What do we know about this man? He didn't suspect she was involved. She's taking the money. He's never even heard from the bad guys. He didn't see it that way, that she got him into this mess. They grew closer after she began extorting him for $3,000 a month. Meanwhile, the defendant and Catherine Magbanua break up. She continues to maintain her direct and indirect contact with Sigfredo Garcia, the man who's extorting him, the man who murdered his former brother-in-law in cold blood. But he sees her as a friend. The kissy faces and the I love yous continue. Even after Catherine Magbanua got back together with the man who executed Dan Markel, the father of his young nephews, and a guy who's actively extorting him, this defendant continued to reach out to her over and over again to offer her favors and gifts, including a birthday gift for Garcia, and to tell her he loves her and how lucky he is to have her in his life. Lucky? Next, to find a reasonable doubt here, you have to find it reasonable that the defendant never texted or talked about this first layer of extortion. Why? According to him, because Catherine Magbanua said, let's never talk about this. So they didn't. Then you have to believe he never reported or revealed this information to law enforcement out of fear of the gangsters. And finally, you have to believe that this living in fear of death by gang members over 2 years didn't cause a change in his general demeanor that his friends noticed, but later the bump from law enforcement did. He says that's because, well, I became worried that I might be falsely arrested. So I wasn't a hot mess when I was being extorted by gang members and threatened to be killed and my whole family killed. But I became a hot mess when I started to get worried that the cops might be getting closer. And I have no real way of knowing if all this stuff sounds ridiculous to you, if it sounds reasonable to you, or if y'all just heard so much stuff that you're totally confused and can't even remember what the evidence in the case showed. But they only need to get one of you.
Right, Ethel. Yeah. Charlie admitted that Kay spent the night after she had emptied his safe for this apparent extortion. Yeah. Okay. So insane.
Confused enough to derail this whole thing, right? So I've got to go through each thing with you. Your verdict has to be unanimous. So I want to go through the testimony, I want to review the evidence, and I want to spend a little bit more time talking about this multitude of explanations the defense has offered in an effort to really turn each piece of evidence on its head. This is Dan Markel. He is the victim in this case. A brilliant lawyer, a funny guy, a son, a colleague, a brother, a mentor, and a friend. But most of all, a father. A dedicated and loving father whose downfall was brought about by the fact that his number one priority was maximizing his access to those two little boys in the wake of a bitter divorce from their mother. And despite the defense's efforts to characterize their client as the real victim here, Dan Markel remains the only victim in this case. The only thing he was guilty of is fighting like hell for those kids. And he lost. He didn't lose in court, but he lost. This is what he looked like before.
Yeah, I hear you, Pussycat. I guess that was Charlie trying to big up the threat, saying that they were, the head of the Latin Kings. But that wasn't quite true, right?
Before this defendant hired a hitman to kill him. And this is what he looked like afterwards. The evidence has shown that on July 18th, 2014, this brilliant man was gunned down in broad daylight in the driveway of his own home. His horrific death ultimately set police down two separate paths following the two most promising leads they had. The first was to chase down that Prius that Mr. Geiger saw fleeing the crime scene. And we'll examine those efforts in detail. The second path was to ask, as we would in any murder investigation, who might want to have done this? Who would want Dan Markel dead? And within 1 hour of the shooting, before Professor Markel was even pronounced dead, this path was already pointing to the defendant. when his sister revealed to law enforcement that her family hated Dan Markel and that her brother, Charlie, had joked about hiring a hitman to kill him. And this trash talk, of course, would be meaningless had he not been killed by a hitman. So who did it appear had a motive to want Dan Markel dead? His own family. And what offense had Mr. Markel committed against these people? Refusing to let his children be taken away from him? Objecting to them disparaging him to his kids? The evidence has shown that the Adelson family was all about psychological warfare. And when all else failed, they were willing to go even further to win. I want to examine this motive in more detail and look at exactly how it's attributable to this defendant. Despite the defense efforts to minimize this, it's really clear that the divorce between Wendy and Danny was a particularly nasty one. They fought over everything, all the way from the children down to the bicycle and the tennis racket. In January of 2013, Wendy Adelson filed a motion to allow her to relocate to South Florida with the kids. They were 2 and 3 at that time. As one basis for this request, Wendy cites the wife's parents reside in Coral Springs and the wife's brother resides 20 minutes away. The children are very close to the wife's parents. Wendy Adelson also alleges in this filing that the husband has also created a hostile work environment for the wife at FSU School of Law. Wendy Adelson viewed herself as stuck in Tallahassee, a characterization which she now denies, but one which was used to describe her situation by Jeffrey Lacasse on the witness stand and also in her own pleadings in these divorce filings. In Markel's answer on page 80, he seeks continued equal time sharing in Tallahassee. He seeks sole parental responsibility on issues related to the education, religion, and medical upbringing of the kids. Then we go to this May email from Donna Adelson to Wendy. These emails are offered as examples of how invested Donna Adelson was in this litigation and in Wendy's life in general. They reveal that relocation was a huge priority for Donna and that it was also a high priority for Wendy, Harvey, and the defendant as well. Wendy testified that her mom really wasn't that involved in her divorce proceedings. Again, these emails prove the opposite was true. On May 3rd, 2013, this email references Dan's divorce filing as, quote, his 23-page rant. She then crystallizes the importance of relocation, stating, the most important part of your divorce is relocation, in bold. I sincerely hope that your attorney understands this is your, all caps, non-negotiable. She needs to hear from you how serious you are about this and how it will benefit the children with a close-knit family support system as well as your significantly better paying job. But on June 21st, 2013, Wendy's motion to relocate was denied by the court, with the court finding that the wife has not met her burden of proof that a relocation is in the best interest of the minor children. Like the heroine in her book, Wendy and the boys were officially stuck in this small stop on the way to what we had previously known as civilization. Wendy worked hard to try to convince you that none of this was a very big deal to her.
Right, Ethel, this closing is fantastic. It really puts so much into context for people, you know, that are going to be watching the upcoming trial of Donna and possibly Wendy.
Her mother or her brother. And she said she was expecting to win everything in the divorce. She was expecting Danny to lose everything in the divorce. She was partly right. Danny did end up losing everything, but not in court. She had already lost relocation, and her attorney had to get off the case as a result of whatever Danny was filing in court. And he was poised to really take her through the ringer with this grandma motion, the fraud allegation, and the contempt motion that was all pending. Even if he wasn't going to be successful, folks, it was going to be a very unpleasant ride for Wendy Adelson. But as we have learned, Jibbers hadn't beaten the Adelson family yet. On the stand, Wendy Adelson suggested that relocation was not a big issue for her. It was just suggested by a friend, but the other evidence in the case suggests the opposite. Jeffrey Lacoste said she was a complete mess over the litigation, especially the relocation. She wrote a book about a human rights attorney who was stuck in a small town in the Florida Panhandle because of her hapless Canadian professor husband's job at NFSU. And maybe most importantly, Wendy filed this motion for relocation. Her lawyer didn't file it without her knowing. Was the motion doomed from the start? Wendy clearly hoped not. But there were other ways to skin the cat. Here's a June email from Donna to Wendy. In response to the court order denying relocation, Donna emails Wendy, quote, "It's time for action. It's time to take control of your life and not let Jibbers think he's won anything by having you remain in Tallahassee, 8 hours away from the only family you have. Let's show this F blank 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 what will make him absolutely miserable. And later, the rest of your life, and consequently, Dad's, mine, and yes, even Charlie's, will be affected by how well you can perform/act before July 31st. You can be a good actress when you want to. I've seen you in action. You need to put on the performance of your life. Jibbers hasn't beaten the Adelson family yet." Then on June 25th, this is continued, that same email, we get a plan of action. Take a photo of the boys dressed nicely standing at the front door by the sign of a Tallahassee church. They're Jewish, remember? Then change your Facebook status to this one so everyone will see this. Perhaps a line under the photo with "New beginnings in Tallahassee" might be nice. How happy do you think he will be? Make arrangements to get the boys caught up with a private tutor at the Teenage Catholic Church who will come to the house to teach the young men about Jesus. If you don't have time to arrange this, I'll be happy to do it for you. Let Jibbers know that your children will be baptized in the Catholic Church, and you'll certainly invite him to the event. I've already checked this out, and the baptism can be arranged within 2 weeks. We can send out evites to Jibbers, his parents, sister, and anyone else you want to invite. 4, I'm looking into summer camp programs for the boys. We will pay for it, even if the boys end up only going for the few days that they're in Tallahassee with you. 5, register them for toddler classes at the church. I've looked into this too. Even if they don't actually go, we can show Jibbers that they are enrolled for the fall semester. And you cannot tell anyone this is an act. Take control from him. Get to him psychologically. He's going to want you to stop this. You have one final opportunity to make him angry. We want him ticked off so he realizes that he could lose control over his kids. We plan to make a financial offer to him to allow this relocation. You need to work this plan, and we'll help you through it so that it may affect how much we offer him. Maybe he's willing to let you relocate if he knew his children could attend this private Hebrew academy. Or perhaps he'd like them to invite him to a Christmas party at their other Sunday school. Let's get this going now. I know you would never want to think that you didn't do absolutely everything you could to come down to your family. Dad and I have changed our lives this year to support you and assist you and the boys in every possible way. Charlie has accepted the loss in the office business income for us to do this because he loves you and wants only the best possible future for you. It's time for you to show us that you can put on the performance of your life for the next few weeks. And then on June 27th, she follows up with another email along the same lines, criticizing the judge and Wendy's attorney and adding, obviously the court isn't out to help you. It's clear since Judge Hobbs' last ruling that she could care less about anything you have to say on your behalf. You need to help yourself. You know, Wendy, most of the wars that have been fought for the last couple of thousand years have been fought over religion. These emails are such telling glimpses into the family.
And just to say, what's also contained in some of these messages from Donna to Wendy, which Georgia doesn't really emphasize, obviously being the prosecutor, but there's little indications here and there that Wendy is not going along with all of Donna's choices or her desires. There's little hints here and there. And it, as we've said, the only slight doubt in this case is in regards to Wendy's knowledge of this.
Dynamics behind this murder. This email is just an example of how relentless Donna Adelson was. And it's clear from these emails that she's conferring with the defendant on these plans that she's proposing. Charlie brought up a good point when he said that Americans were dropped behind enemy lines during World War II wearing Nazi uniforms to get what they wanted. They had a job to get done, and they did what they needed to accomplish it. You have a job to get done in a very short time frame to accomplish it. If you dressed the kids up in Hitler Youth uniforms and brought them down here, I could care less if it was an act of defiance that would show Gibbers that he's not in control. Why not stand up to this fucker? Why not fight? That's all this is, Wendy, an act of defiance that will put a scare into this jackass. It will infuriate him. You need to see the big picture. You need to look into the future of what a life without your only family nearby teaching in Tallahassee, with Danny always in the picture, will give you. It's not a pretty picture. Not everything one has to do in life is comfortable or easy. The extremism that Gibbers is already teaching the boys is nothing more than brainwashing. Religion is brainwashing, control of the masses. I don't think you realize the type of offer we're considering. We're planning on you, Charlie, Dad, and I going as high as equal parts in a $1 million offer. That's $333,000 from each of us. We're a team. We can't do this without your help. You've already lost relocation according to the legal system. Well, it is about winning and losing. We're trying to get a win. You deserve it. You deserve so much more than a life without family teaching in Tallahassee.
Can I interrupt something real quick?
On July 31st, 2013.
Of course you can.
Okay, so I think I missed. I saw someone say something earlier that if this was about race instead of religion, you know, it would have been a whole different thing, right? Is that what this is really all about? I mean, does she really hate his religion? Because I mean, that's kind of what it's sounding like, and because I've never heard these before, so I have questions. It almost sounds like you know, she's taking control and she's kind of pushing Wendy to fight harder for this when Let me ask you this, since you know this case better. If the mom wasn't doing this crap, like J-May and I are talking about, like, you know, we've both been through divorces and our parents were not involved in it.
Right.
Would this have happened, do you think? Do you think the mom pushed her to this?
That's the crucial question. Exactly that. How much, if at all, was she aware of this arrangement to have Dan murdered, right? It's definitely clear from going through some of these messages that Wendy is railing to some extent against Donna and must be feeling overwhelmed by Donna. I think that's definitely true. You have to weigh it all up because there's a lot on the other side as well, which is quite damning for Wendy. As I say, it's lots of little small things that add up. Like I mentioned earlier, the fact that Wendy had messaged Dan. Now this was July the 6th, so he was murdered July the 18th. So this is about a week prior. She texted Dan to say, "Are you in Tallahassee, July the 14th to the 18th? I just want to know if I can have the kiddos on the 16th, thanks." And they were able to tell from phone records that Wendy was at or near her parents' home in South Florida when she sent that message. So that's just like one little example. Dan texted back saying, "Yes, you can." I think without doubt, Donna was in complete charge of many decisions that were going on in Wendy's life, right? Or was having a huge influence. Yeah, Jamie, she doesn't push, she bulldozes.
Yeah, I mean, she's saying basically, come on, get with the program. We have a plan, and this is what we're gonna do. And
This is a war.
A war. And she said it right there. This is about winning. It's about winning. You know, it's not like about, you know, what would happen to the kids if we don't win, you know, nothing like that. It's just about winning. This is, see, I never heard these. These are horrible.
But just
these are not going to help her in court at all.
Right. But just to address your point about the religion thing, I don't think, because they were all Jewish. The Adelsons were Jewish too. They just weren't as devout as Dan, right? But her going on about the religion here has nothing to do with any anti-Semitism or anything like that. They were merely using his religion to try and provoke him. That's all it was really about. It could have been if it was any religion, they would have done the same she would have tried to do the same thing. Does that make sense? It was a way of getting back at Dan because Dan was destroying Wendy in the court. Like the relocation was dismissed with prejudice. So she could never even address that issue again in court. Not at that court anyway. And Dan had also filed a motion to deny Donna unsupervised visitation with the kids. It hadn't gone through by the time of the murder, but he had filed the motion.
Mm-hmm.
And by all accounts, he had just filed another motion more recently, which was going to potentially cause Wendy to lose her job. And there was the issue with the divorce settlement. He was not going to pay the divorce settlement because, according to his argument, Wendy hadn't declared certain assets.
Oh.
And Wendy's attorney had to jump off the case as a result of this, I think.
Got it. Okay, I'm getting caught up.
But I hope you guys don't mind me playing a lot of this closing argument because it's such a great summary of a lot of the important details in this.
Yeah. I don't mind because I didn't know about this stuff.
But yeah, guys, just fire any questions that come to mind as you're watching this.
The anger and bitterness associated with this split was still festering. Litigation continued and even increased as both parties filed motions over the next several months alleging that the other was violating the marital settlement agreement, and both parties seeking to have the other side held in contempt of court. In October of 2013, Wendy filed a motion to enforce the marital settlement agreement and have Dan held in contempt. And Dan was hearing, and the defendant was hearing about all of this as it went on from his mother, as indicated in the emails and in the text messages shown here as well. Here she's telling him how terrible things are for Wendy and how it's negatively affecting his dad's health. Then later that month, when Wendy was about to make the second dumbest mistake of her life after marrying Dan Markell, by buying a house in Tallahassee, Charlie says Wendy probably hasn't mentioned it to him because it's stupid. And then after he gets Wendy to pull the plug on the house, he's praised as the miracle worker that solved this problem. This text was sent on Halloween of 2013, the very day that Catherine Magdanola testified. This defendant broached the subject to her of, hey, do you know anybody that could rough somebody up? The defendant was hearing about Wendy's situation regularly from Donna. Here we see Donna telling the defendant how angry at Wendy's attorney and stressed out Wendy is. That's on February 15th of 2014. And here's another text from Donna Adelson to Charlie Adelson 4 days later, discussing the details of Danny's actions and expressing how much she hates him. Here on March 4th, 2014, we have Donna planning to speak in private with the defendant while she's at the rest stop in Gainesville. She asks him to delete this message after he reads it. Although he's not with Harvey, and Harvey nor his birthday are mentioned in this text message. All that's mentioned in this text message is, I'm going to pull over at a rest stop and talk to you in private. This is the grandma motion. On March 26, 2014, less than 4 months prior to this murder, the defendant files his grandma motion, the counter motion for enforcement of marital settlement agreement on parenting issues, and motion for contempt and sanctions. Again, alleging that Wendy is not facilitating communication between he and the kids, and getting after Donna personally. In this filing, Dan Markell alleges that on 3 separate occasions in November of 2013, the children informed him of their maternal grandmother, Donna Adelson, disparaging him. The boys indicate that, quote, Grandma says you're stupid. She says you are trying to take her sunshines away from her. And, quote, Grandma says she hates you. Dan Markell requests the court, quote, enjoin the former wife from allowing the maternal grandmother to have unsupervised time with the children, and to impose appropriate limitations to safeguard the children from being subjected to disparaging comments about their father. Contrary to what Wendy Adelson told us, we learned this issue was taken seriously by both sides, and that Dan Markell was particularly hot at the time of his death because of some recent issues that were going on. So to the extent that there was any banana bread peace offering made, it apparently fell short of diffusing the issues within this family. This situation was a pressure cooker, and it was about to blow. As we learned, this grandma motion was never decided by the court because Dan Markell was murdered before it could be heard. Whether or not that is a coincidence in timing is up to you all to decide. Wendy told you that she and Dan were getting along pretty well at the time leading up, or the weeks leading up to his murder. But this assertion does not fit with the rest of the evidence in this case. In fact, her own court filings are completely contrary to that assertion. In addition, her boyfriend at the time, Jeffrey Lacasse, told you all that she took all of this very seriously, that she became upset every time there was a filing, and that her behavior became increasingly emotional and erratic as the time led closer and closer up to what ultimately was the murder day. According to Lacasse, she was especially concerned about the relocation issue. And Stephen Webster, he was Professor Markel's attorney that testified, told us that Markel was irate at the time of his death over two issues. The first being Wendy enrolling one of the kids in a school without consulting him, and the second one being him overhearing Donna Adelson refer to him as stupid on a recent Skype visit that he had with the boys. So this was far from the peaceful situation that Wendy was trying to sell you.
That's Dan's parents there, Ruth and Phil.
Why was she trying to sell you that? Was she trying to protect her brother? She even told law enforcement at her interview on the day of the murder that she wanted everyone held accountable for this to the fullest extent of the law, unless it was her family. The defense seems to be telling you the litigation between Danny and Wendy was not a very big deal, because minimizing the litigation minimizes.
With Dan's sister there on the left.
The motive for the Adelson family to want Dan Markel dead. They even called Wendy's attorney to tell you that relocation was a lost cause. But what she actually said was, yes, I lose most of these motions, but in this case I actually thought there was a chance because of some of the surrounding circumstances. Then I thought, well, maybe they called her to say the divorce was routine, but what she actually said was this case was odd. That was her word. Mainly because Dan Markel came after her personally, forcing her to withdraw from the case, which had never happened before. So what her testimony proved was that this was not a routine, run-of-the-mill divorce proceeding. It was one of her more difficult cases. And she didn't even have Donna in her ear like the defendant did. So the motive was clearly there. The question then becomes, was the defendant successful in distancing himself from that motive in your eyes as jurors? He says that the litigation had no impact on his life. The emails suggest otherwise. He's included on these texts. He's all over the wiretap, meddling in Wendy's life with Donna. Could the defendant have cared enough about his sister's marital problems to commit murder? Maybe, maybe not. But if he didn't, his mom certainly cared enough with both of them. And she was in his ear all the time. In defendant's own words, you can't have a miserable mom. To illustrate this point, I refer you back to the emails and to that phone call that I played that happened before the bump, where Donna and the defendant are discussing this boyfriend of Wendy's at that time, Dave. This call, along with the call about Wendy taking a particular job, which is also on that same exhibit, I think it states 130, was offered as examples to show you how the dynamics work in this family. Wendy appears to be the weakling of the pack. She needs to be protected. She needs to be helped. She needs to be coddled. She needs to be saved by Donna and the defendant. Donna is the overbearing matriarch who nags everyone to death about whatever it is that's currently on her. I call it the wheel. The wheel's turning all the time, right? And Wendy getting away from Dan Markel and moving to South Florida was number one on the wheel. It was the top priority in 2013 and in 2014. And this defendant fancied himself the savior of this family. Equal parts black sheep and mama's boy, he would often try to help Wendy at Donna's bidding. When a problem was perceived regarding Wendy's love life, aka this breaking up with Dave situation, shouldn't break up with Dave, Dave's a great guy, Donna enlists the defendant to go in and fix it, to solve the problem. When Wendy didn't know what was best for her regarding a job opportunity, Donna sent the defendant to fix it. And the evidence has shown that Dan Markell was a major problem for Wendy, and that meant he was a major problem for Donna, who in turn made Dan Markell a major problem for this defendant. Enter Catherine Magbanua, who had connections to a criminal element, and she presented an opportunity to the defendant to do what he does and solve this problem. On Halloween 2013, the defendant began the process of soliciting Catherine Magbanua to commit murder. Magbanua solicited Garcia. Garcia brought in Rivera. So if the seed of this conspiracy was planted in the spring of 2013, when Donna was looking into converting the kids to Christianity or making this $1 million offer to Dan Markell, it took root that summer when the relocation was denied and the defendant began, quote, looking into all options to solve the problem of Danny Markell, including hiring a hitman. And the conspiracy grew further still when Dan Markell filed that motion to preclude Donna from having unsupervised contact with the grandkids, the grandma motion. And as Wendy Adelson relayed to Jeffrey Lacoste just 5 days before the murder, she was never going to be able to move to South Florida unless something happened to Danny. This conspiracy spread when the defendant met someone who could actually get this thing done. Someone who was in a position of trust in his life, a person who had connections to the kind of people who, for a price, were willing to point a gun at a complete stranger and pull the trigger. And guess what wasn't a problem once Dan Markell was dead? Relocation. Within a couple days, Wendy and the kids moved to South Florida. She changed the names of Professor Markell's children from Markell to Adelson. And just like that, their father was erased. No more squabbles over kosher diets or visitation. His status as a felon and a gang member are definitely things you should consider when you're weighing his testimony in this case. But please consider that his resume as a bad guy was precisely why he was selected to do this gruesome job. Rivera's gang status made him a more attractive candidate to do this murder with Garcia. In the hot tub in March of 2014, the defendant mentions his connection to a Cuban criminal element. Jeffrey Lacoste reported this within a couple days of the murder when he couldn't have known the ethnicity of the killer. The evidence has shown that the connection the defendant had was through Catherine Magbanua, and the criminal element was, of course, Garcia and Rivera. And we know that at the time defendant made that statement in the hot tub, the plan to kill Dan Markell was already well in the works. That statement was made just 3 months before the killer's first trip to Tallahassee in June of 2014. The statement reveals that the defendant wasn't scared of Catherine Magbanua and her associates. To the contrary, he was boastful. He was bragging about it. He was the big man who was going to solve his little sister's problem, make his mom proud, and get away with it because he was thinking of everything. And he later would say and call JJ that nothing was done improper and suggest that no evidence could be available to tie the killers to him or his family. And he was confident enough of this to brag about it in that hot tub setting, which he thought could never come back to him. He was untouchable. Because if push ever really came to shove, who are you going to believe? An oral surgeon or a gang member? He's banking on that. In regards to Rivera's plea deal, the actual only condition of his plea deal is to tell the truth. And what did he tell us? Catherine Magbanua hired Garcia, and Garcia hired him to do a murder. Why? To help the lady who he understood to be the dentist's sister to get her kids. Aside from fitting with the other evidence in the case, there were a few things that independently corroborated Rivera's testimony. One is that accidental discharge that he told us took place in the rented Prius. This was a fact we didn't know before and were able to confirm upon reinspection of the vehicle. He also told us about the location and timing of the money drop on the morning after the murder at his and Jessica's residence, which was able to be confirmed or corroborated initially by phone records and now also by Catherine Magbanua's testimony. And of course, the phone records confirm Rivera did come to Tallahassee, not just on the July trip, which we knew about, but also on that first June scouting trip or attempted murder trip. The communication records tell us a few other things too. That's the June trip. July, June. This slide shows all the calls between our parties on the night before the shooters made that June trip to Tallahassee. You can see a 25-minute call from Catherine Magbanua to the defendant at 9:17 p.m. on June 2nd, 2014. This call was placed while Catherine Magbanua was consistent with traveling on her way back from Comfort Rental Car, where the first rental car was rented, to her residence. As soon as the defendant hangs up with Katie, he calls his parents' landline and has a 25-minute conversation. On the stand, the defendant was asked about the use of landlines and whether he believed them to be more secure. He testified that on the call he was being asked about at that time, that he was talking about switching over to a landline because he was in a place that had bad reception. If there is bad reception in South Florida at a dental office, what about all the other mentions of using a landline that we hear on the wire? Surely he wasn't in a place with bad reception for all those calls. And why call the parents on the landline? Surely they have reception in their South Beach high-rise. In the 2 years of phone records that were examined in this case, the defendant talks to his parents on the landline 28 times, or 0.07% of the times that he talks to them. So mostly on the cell phone by a large majority. 3 of these 28 times were on the days that the cars were rented to do these trips to Tallahassee. Whether or not that is a coincidence is entirely up to you. After the killers returned from Tallahassee on that first trip, we have a couple text messages of interest. On June 8th, 2014, the defendant indicates he's still working on Dad's birthday present, and Donna indicates, "I know you'll come through." Then on July 6th.
So with this, there's a suggestion that this is another situation where they're using code words, really, referring to Dad's birthday present, which was obviously denied by Charlie. But there's a suggestion by the prosecution that they're actually, Donna's needing to talk to Charlie here about the upcoming murder.
We've got Wendy Adelson with a location at or near her parents' place when she texts Dan Markell and confirms he's going to be in town for his own murder. This slide depicts the night before the second trip. We know Catherine Magbanua and the defendant are together that evening at her place. He departs between 12:42 and 1 a.m. And then so after the defendant departs Catherine Magbanua's residence, we've got Catherine Magbanua calling Sigfredo Garcia. So within minutes of The defendant leaving, she calls Garcia. She talks to Garcia several more times into the wee hours of that night, the last one being at 1:56 a.m. And then at 9 a.m. the next morning, Garcia calls the rental car place. Once the Prius is rented, the second trip begins. The Prius is rented at 6:15 p.m. on July 15th, 2014. There are several calls between our parties on the day that the Prius is rented. So we just talked about the night before the Prius was rented. On the day the Prius was rented, we've got these two calls, several calls, including these two calls from the defendant to his parents' landline. Garcia and Rivera then depart for Tallahassee July 16th about 2 p.m. and arrive in Tallahassee around 1 a.m. Although this trip was only about 36 hours from the time they left Miami to the time they returned, there were 12 phone events between the defendant and Catherine Magbanoa during that time, and there were 4 phone events between the defendant and Donna Adelson during that time frame, including late into the night on the night before the murder. On July 17th, Magbanoa relayed to the shooters that this murder had to be done that day because the victim was scheduled to leave town the next day. And we confirmed that Dan Markel was in fact scheduled to leave for New York City the next morning on July 19th. It's hard to imagine how Luis Rivera could have obtained this information, if not in that pattern that we consistently observe in this case. Defendant to Magbanoa, to Garcia, to Rivera, and back the other way. Certainly you're not really to believe that the killers divined this information from the professor's blog. That's not reasonable. Wendy offered that Danny sometimes put his travel information on Facebook, but you learned from Agent Sanford that there was no information about this particular trip on Danny's Facebook, so they didn't get it from there. This is because, as Rivera and Magbanoa both told you, this information came in the form of that letter from defendant through Catherine Magbanoa. How would these two hitmen even know where to go or who to kill if they hadn't been given any kind of instruction?
Yeah, so Charlie gave the information to Katie through a letter that he put in her handbag, I think, or her diaper bag. Told Katie to not touch it when she was passing it on to Garcia, Sigfrido Garcia. And he said that he had taken measures to make sure that his thumbprints weren't on it, his fingerprints weren't on it, and Katie should do the same thing. And just like Georgia said there, Rivera spoke about this when he was testifying, that Dan's picture was in this envelope with some information. So they were always very sure to try and cover their tracks, Charlie and Donna. They just fell to pieces as soon as the bump happened and spilled everything on their phone calls. And when Charlie was meeting with Katie.
Catherine Magbanoa said she knew the plan was to kill Wendy's ex, but she never knew his full name until after he was killed. She did, however, deliver that envelope that the defendant put in her diaper bag to Sigfrido Garcia. The paper, she knew, contained the instructions for the murder. Defendant advised Catherine Magbanoa that she should not touch the envelope or open it, as he had taken precaution to ensure that his prints and DNA would not be on it, that it would be untraceable to him, and she should do the same. She was to deliver the envelope to Garcia, and that's what she did. This is corroborated by Rivera, who says Garcia had a paper with him on the first trip, and it contained a picture of Dan Markel and a printed address. On the day of the murder, we have communications between our parties as listed here. with the red line representing the time of the murder. This flurry of calls between our persons of interest demonstrates the usual call pattern that we're seeing. Donna to the defendant, to Catherine Ibano, to Garcia and back. We have.
There's also an indication that Katie McBanoa knew of the murder before she was even contacted by the hitmen. According to Rivera, when they called Katie later that day to tell her the job had been done, she said, I already knew, I knew. So people think that, how did Katie know? Most likely through Wendy.
Right.
Whether it was directly from Wendy to Katie or through Charlie, most likely through Charlie, right?
Wendy getting a text message on the day of the murder about her TV repair appointment from her mother, Donna Adelson.
And this is another one of these little bits of evidence, circumstantial evidence that adds up for Wendy. This whole thing about the TV repair on the day of the murder, on the morning of the murder. People that have seen the trial will know from Jeffrey Lacasse, who was Wendy's boyfriend leading up to this. He related how strange it was that Donna was so adamant that he, Jeffrey, be so aware of this broken television. It was really strange to him that she really wanted him to know about how damaged this television was, and the fact that she wouldn't let him play a DVD on a different television in a different room for the kids. She insisted that they watch it on this broken television where the kids couldn't even really watch the film because it was so damaged. You know, she was planting seeds, it seems. And then the issue of just the actual TV itself becoming a code word that Donna used a few times during her calls with Charlie after the bump. You know, if you try and explain away the whole thing about the TV and the initial circumstances, how do you explain away Donna referring to the TV again in reference to the bump years later? And you've got the fact that Charlie had made this joke to Wendy that she bought Wendy this television because it was cheaper than buying a Hitman as a divorce present.
Yeah,
And she,
I knew about that. Yeah. This is
got,
just crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. I know.
It indicates that Best Buy is on their way over to help you with the TV sets in your living room. Maybe she didn't remember which TV was broken. At 8:20, on the day of the murder, Wendy texts the defendant, "This is so sweet." That text was deleted. What does it mean? At 9:19 a.m., there's a phone call between Wendy Adelson and this defendant that lasts about, 30 minutes? No. 18 minutes. So this is about 30 minutes.
Yeah, and remember the murder took place about 10:51, 10:52.
Before the murder, when they hang up. They say they were discussing this TV that was not repairable. The TV that he gave her as a divorce present because it's cheaper than hiring a hitman. Only you guys can assess if you think that might just be a coincidence and nothing more. The Prius is at premiere at 9:16 a.m. The last phone communication between Garcia and Rivera is at 9:16. Afterwards, the phones turn off, consistent with what Rivera told you. We turned our phones off because we knew we were about to commit the murder. and they don't pop back up until I think about 12:30. The bus video catches them turning onto Benton Road to do the murder at 10:51 a.m., whereby they pull up right behind Professor Markel in his driveway. Sigfredo Garcia gets out of the Prius, approaches the driver's window, pointed his gun, and fired. Dan Markel raised his arm to protect himself, but it was no use. Professor Markel was executed at close range, whereby Garcia got back in the Prius and Rivera drove him away. Markel was left there to suffer and die. If not for James Geiger, there's no telling how many hours he might have suffered there alone and unaided. He fought for his life for 14 long hours before he finally succumbed to his injuries. The autopsy confirmed that he was shot twice at close range with a .38 caliber revolver, consistent with what Rivera said they brought as the murder weapon. Next, he was stripped, x-rayed, photographed, and dissected because he had become a piece of evidence. When Garcia and Rivera get back on the road, they're on a second bus video, leaving town at 10:55. That narrows the time of this shooting down to a 4-minute window between 10:51 when they're seen turning on to Benton and 10:55 when they're caught fleeing the scene. And then we've got the 911 call from Mr. Geiger at 11:01 a.m. The first phone call that either Garcia or Rivera make after turning off their phones to do the murder. So first call after that is at 12:30, and it's Garcia to Catherine Magbanawa. Magbanawa assures them that they'll get their money the next day. This is the same time frame, roughly, that Wendy Adelson was visiting the crime scene. Wendy indicated that she went to turn onto Trescott from Centerville Road, observed a roadblock, and then turned around. But we learned that what she said happened could not have happened. Instead, the roadblock was all the way down here by the blue dot. I've got two blue dots. The one at the top left of the page there is where the roadblock was, that yellow line, 3 to 5 houses down from the scene. Trescott and Centerville is all the way down where the other yellow bar is. Visible from the roadblock that she approached and was observed doing so by Officer Brannon were multiple law enforcement vehicles, marked vehicles. There was crime scene tape up. There was a marked vehicle with an officer stationed at the perimeter. It was visible from that position that there was something going on at her kid's house, the house where they lived with their father. And what did Wendy Adelson do upon encountering this roadblock and observing that?
This will always be the most damning evidence in regards to Wendy. I mean, look where the roadblock is. She says in court during this same trial here that she barely got onto Trescott. The blue dot on the right-hand side is the turning on to Trescott. The yellow line is the whole drive up there. The cops confirmed that they've seen Wendy drive up to the roadblock. It's 2 or 3 houses down from Dan's home. Her actions after this are completely inexplicable. And she has perjured herself with her testimony there. I'm sure of it. What mother would not be making calls?
Right, that's what I was saying earlier, you know?
Right? No, I mean, she would have known that the kids were in preschool. Dan dropped them off at preschool a couple of hours before he was murdered. But she doesn't know that for certain that they're safe, right? You would be panicking.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's really telling, I think.
Yeah. Of course, you can't convict only on that, can you? Even though you kind of know that it's just too suspicious. It just depends how much more.
That's how it seems with a lot of the stuff about her. It's like common sense tells you she clearly knew, but that's not evidence, right?
Yeah. Right.
So wait, Ethel said cop at the roadblock said it's likely Wendy could have seen down to Dan's house from the roadblock. Well, that makes it even worse then, right?
That's the other thing. It's not like there's a good argument that she wasn't aware that something exceptional was going on right nearby Dan's home. It was like the cop, like Ethel said, the cop confirmed that anyone driving up there would, with all the crime scene tape and the proximity of the vehicles to the home, would know.
Mm-hmm.
And she tries to fob it off as well. I just thought there was a tree down or something, so I went on my way to get my bourbon for this.
Again, that's one of her. All she had to do was try to call him. She would have known he wouldn't have answered. But yeah, just because it just looks so suspicious. But again, it's not evidence.
Yeah. I mean, you could almost make the argument that it's so utterly insane for her to do this if she had knowledge of this, that maybe it is just that, right? It was just a diabolical coincidence, but I don't know.
The police were present on the street where her kids lived. She turned around and proceeded to the liquor store to pick up her bullet bourbon. And the defendant says, well, this is another coincidence because she was asked to bring it to a party. Well, maybe. But the timing of the purchase and the fact that she went out of her way to go by the crime scene on her way to get the bullet bourbon should raise an eyebrow. But it's what she didn't do that's even more suspicious. She didn't ask Officer Brannon, hey, what's going on? She didn't call Danny. She didn't call the police to make any inquiries, or even the daycare to make sure her kids made it there that morning. Remember, Danny had her kids. She didn't even call the daycare. Meanwhile, our shooters are headed back to Miami. They pop up on an ATM camera at 6:45 p.m. in Pembroke Pines, Florida. And then both of their phones are consistent with being at Rivera's residence as of about 7 p.m. that night. At 8:23 p.m., Catherine Ibanwa and the defendant make plans to meet up at his house. At 9 p.m., Donna texts the defendant, outside your house, to which he responds, 10 men. He told you from the witness stand that this text meant that Donna was just passing by his house on her way to Tallahassee, and that they weren't meeting up. But Catherine Ibanwa testified that when she arrived at defendant's house, the defendant advised her that his parents had just been there, and then he thought his mom had physically washed the money, which was damp when Catherine Ibanwa received it. Ibanwa finds the defendant to be carrying his gun around and in a frantic state. About the time that these two are meeting up at the defendant's house to do the money exchange, Dan Markell is pronounced dead at TMH. So he says he's going to be about 10 minutes out. Here he is, hitting at home at 9:40 p.m. At 9:46, we see Catherine Ibanwa, consistent with being at Rivera's residence. and then consistent with heading toward the defendant's residence, she turns her phone off, and it stays off for 11 hours. When Magdalena's phone pops back up, it's 9:44 a.m. on Saturday morning, and she's headed back from the defendant's house, or the direction of his house, toward Rivera's residence. That's the money drop location. These phones are consistent with a meeting at 10:30 at Rivera's, which is the time, date, and place that he advised us he received his money from Magdalena. At 12:13 p.m., the defendant reaches out to Magdalena. Defendant, headed to the gym. Are you taking the kids to the beach? It's so nice. Magdalena, it's beautiful. Probably the pool. Defendant, nice, have fun. Ethan must be happy. This is what he's texting Magdalena within hours of her leaving, with all the money in his safe. All of the money that he stared at and loved on since he was a child. And he wants to know if she's going to the pool. This might be a good time to remind you that the jury room is not a place to check your common sense. We want you to bring it in there. You have heard two wildly different versions of how
Hey,
this thing
Suzanne.
went down, and they can't both be right. I mean, somebody's trying to sell you a bill of goods. You were selected with the belief that you would be able to cut through the garbage and make sense of the evidence in this case and render a verdict that speaks the truth. A major problem for the defense theory is the idea that the defendant and Magdalena broke up after the murder, but then grew closer together over the next 2 years as she was collecting his monthly extortion payments. This is one of the more unreasonable parts of the defendant's testimony, or, well, it's definitely in the top 4, along with Latin King extortion payment plans, hitmen that hire themselves to kill someone that their intended future extortion victim hates, and most unreasonable of all is probably that Charlie Adelson, the guy that talks so tough in the hot tub about his unsavory connections, an arrogant man of extraordinary resources, a prize fighter of verbosity, would just lay down and take this in silence. Let's review some of these love texts. We got that one. Then we've got July 22nd. They're talking about the weather. They're talking about prescription shampoo. On October 6th, the defendant says, "I love you. It makes me feel good that you care about me. I'm very lucky to have you as a part of my life." What? Lucky? Lucky. He says, "I love you" again on 2/24/15. According to him, he's now been making payments for 7 months. He's had her on the payroll for 6 months. No Latin Kings have contacted him in any way about collecting his outstanding debt of $195,000. Yet he continues to pay and love on Catherine Magdalena without reservation and without the slightest suspicion that she might be in on this, and without the slightest concern for helping solve the murder of who killed his brother-in-law. Defendant says he believed Catherine Magdalena wasn't taking any of the money even after he put her on the payroll. The checks are going to her because she seemed broke. Defendant's explanation for all the love texts with Catherine Magdalena is that he felt sorry for her. He felt she was in the same position that he was in, being manipulated in the same way that he was. But the fact remains, folks, that she's taking his money. She's connected to the guy that's extorting him. She's connected to the guy that killed his brother-in-law. It defies logic that he would then proceed to grow closer with her. But he has to say that because he can't, there's no other way around these texts. It also defies reason based on what we know of this man, that he would take her for her word and just empty his safe into her purse and then keep paying, presumably forever, without asking any questions, talking about it all, or reporting anything to the police. Magdalena began getting checks from Adelson Institute 2 months after Markel's murder, and she continued receiving checks from that time frame up until the bump. The checks stopped happening at the time of the bump, and you should be asking yourself what that means. Why did the checks stop happening? Well, you would reasonably figure they stopped happening because the parties got spooked, because law enforcement, they suspected the bump could be law enforcement. Law enforcement might be getting closer, take her off the payroll. If defendant was being extorted, as he told you on the witness stand, why would the payments stop? Why would the extortionist care if other extortionists had jumped on the bandwagon? Why would the bump impact the defendant's existing obligations to the original Latin Kings? The defendant said he put her on the payroll at Adelson Institute at her request to help her get insurance for her kids, with the understanding that the money was being funneled through her to someone else and she wasn't actually getting any of the proceeds. She was just going to use that paycheck to assist her with getting subsidized housing or insurance, I think it was, for her kids. But you can see from this slide, which is dated June 24th, 2014, that she's texting him about getting on the payroll prior to this alleged first extortion effort. He says no problem at that time. This is between the first and second trips. She's asking to be on the payroll. So the explanation from defendant about why she's on the payroll does not fit with the other evidence in this case. So we've got all this evidence that points to the defendant. The motive points to him. When we follow the money, it leads to him. The Prius eventually leads back to him through these conspirators. And each time we have a big event in this case, we see these call flurries where all the parties are calling each other in that structure that I talked about. It goes from this one to this one to this one. But as the defense points out, these folks had independent relationships with each other that could explain those communication patterns. So without knowing the content, how could we know if they're really talking about the murder or if these call flurries around these key events are just a coincidence? A conspiracy can be shaped like a cluster with everybody talking to everybody. It can be shaped like a wheel with one central hub talking to all the different spokes. Or it can be shaped like a train car, which is what we have here, where one person talks to only the car in front of them and the car behind them. Law enforcement was asking these same questions. How is this conspiracy shaped? How does it work? How does information flow through it? What are different parties' relative roles within a conspiracy? And the wiretap and bump were designed to answer those questions. Did you notice that Donna Adelson, see how the paper's folded in half? She didn't even look at the paper before she put it in her purse.
Yeah, this is pretty interesting. The way the undercover guy comes up to give her the information on the paper, and he's already got it folded like that. And Donna takes it, and then when the agent leaves, she does not even look at it. She keeps it folded and puts it in her purse and then goes along to pick up her grandkids. I know it's just a small thing, but even that is so telling, right? She knew what was going to be in there already.
Yeah.
She didn't think this was a process server. She knew exactly what it was the moment this man approached. And then she just goes about her business. Does she give law enforcement this valuable information that could be used to solve the brutal murder of her son-in-law? I mean, this guy that approached her obviously knows something about who killed Dan Markel, right? So surely she went straight to the cops. Nope. Instead, she goes straight to this defendant, who goes straight to Catherine Panama, who goes straight to Sigfredo Garcia. In that first call after the bump, Donna says she doesn't want to talk on the phone, but defendant can't leave it alone. He asks, does it involve me or other people? Her answer, well, probably the both of us. Probably both of us. He says, what's that? Probably the two of us. So you probably have a general idea what I'm talking about. He doesn't say, no, I have no general idea what you're talking about. He says, all right. He absolutely does have a general idea what she...
And remember, this is them trying to be careful on the phone. Like Donna initially was not wanting to even speak much on the phone about this once she told Charlie about the bump. But Charlie couldn't help himself and was phoning back, asking more questions. But they were still trying to be careful, and yet still they were leaking all this out.
She's talking about, and if they were innocent, as the defendant has claimed, and this was in fact a second extortion attempt, there is not a reason in the world why they wouldn't just say that. I got approached by another one. One came and paid me a visit today. It's happening again. In call B, the defendant asked Donna to take a picture of the bump letter and send it to him, and she refuses. Why? Are the Latin Kings going to see the text? Do you think someone is trying to blackmail you? Maybe. Could be. I don't know. No. That's crazy. That's his response. And I'm not adding the emphasis on that syllable. He says it like that. That's crazy. How is it crazy? You're already being extorted by Latin King members. Remember, doctor? It's because he hadn't come up with that part yet. In call C, defendant calls back again to tell Donna not to talk about things in the apartment or any place. Why? Why? The Latin Kings aren't in there. And she doesn't ask why, because it's obvious. She says, oh, obviously. Why? Because they might be under surveillance? Well, who cares if they have nothing to hide? Here we see the first use of code on the wire. People don't talk in code if they've done nothing wrong. People do not talk in code if they haven't done anything wrong. Defendant knows, he knows that fact, and that's why he told you we didn't talk in code on the wire. We spoke carefully. What does that mean? Careful of what? Defendant also told you under oath that he regrets that his mom randomly used the word TV in this call as part of her careful talk. The defendant got Wendy Adelson a TV as a divorce present as a cheaper alternative to hiring a hitman. Dan Markell was killed by a hitman. Then the same TV is Wendy's alibi for the murder, a service appointment that her mother set up for her from South Florida. And then on the wire, Donna says, quote, this TV is going to cost about $5. Does the defendant say, what TV? What are you talking about, since you inserted a random object into this careful talk conversation? No, he doesn't need to ask what TV, because he knows exactly what she's talking about, and he ferrets it back. They asked you for $5,000? The defendant has advised you that this TV stuff is a coincidence. Is it a coincidence, or is it obvious they're referring to their conspiracy and this murder? Only you can decide which explanation is credible. The players in this case are smart. They've given a lot of thought to their preparations before this and to their explanations after. We know the seed was planted in early 2013, and it took over 1 year to come to fruition. And they've really thought of almost everything. A clever TV-related alibi for Wendy, a frame job for Lacasse, and they insulated themselves by hiring Catherine McVanois as a middleman, walling themselves off like those train cars, only communicating with the one in front and the one behind, and having no connection to the one further down the line. It's also important to note that in these first few calls, A, B, and C, that Donna Adelson describes the bump to the defendant, and she says the person that approached her mentioned an ex-girlfriend, but she does not say the name Katie or Catherine. Then, with only this very limited information, defendant calls only one of his many ex-girlfriends, Catherine McVanois. In call D, defendant tells McVanois that he thinks that this undercover, the would-be extortionist, said her name. We know this is true. The undercover did say Katie, but Donna had not yet told the defendant that. They only communicated in calls A, B, and C. And the only communication on those calls was that the person mentioned ex-girlfriend. On the wire, the defendant says he just called Katie, Catherine McVanois, because she was his most recent ex-girlfriend. Well, we know that's not true because there's at least one woman that defendant will admit meets that definition between McVanois and the bump, and that's Whitney Kick. On the stand, he told you all that you might not be the right Katie conversation. There's several mentions of that. Yo, I'm not sure you're the right Katie. I apologize. I'll feel stupid if you're not the right Katie. That was designed to reassure her that he was not setting her up. Once defendant meets with his mother and gets the details and the paper with the undercover's phone number, he meets up with Catherine McVanois at Dolce Vita. If they had any evidence, we'd have already gone to the airport. Does that sound like an innocent man? Even if they bug your phone, you're still not talking about any of this. Talking about what? The cops would only bug your phone to get information about the murder. And if you don't have any, then there's nothing to not talk about. The cops aren't going to be doing a wiretap to investigate him getting extorted, which he hasn't even reported to law enforcement. So, not talk about what? Defendant discusses how he's going to start arming himself and is prepared to shoot. He told you under oath from the stand that he was being threatened and extorted by gang members for 2 years at the time that this recording was made. And now he's just starting to think about carrying a gun? Does this sound like a man that's been living in fear for 2 years? Does this sound like a guy who lays down and takes his lumps without question when threatened? Someone comes up to me asking for money in my house? He says that. Lines 23 and 24 on the top there. He says this as if it's a preposterous proposition that somebody would just walk into his house and demand money. But isn't that what happened to you? How is that preposterous? But wait, what changed? On the next page he says, yeah, and guess what? When the fucking police show up and there's a doctor, there's an oral surgeon standing there with a dead gang member in his fucking driveway, they're not going to come down too hard on me. This is the same man who took the witness stand and swore under oath that he was a victim in this case and that he had been too paralyzed by fear of gang members to come forward and report his victimization. Dr. Adelson on this recording is the real Dr. Adelson. On the stand, he was so controlled, so knowledgeable about his case, so practiced. But there is no way to explain away his statements on this recording. When the bump happens, you get to observe this defendant in action in his role as fixer or problem solver. He's working those phones, trying to get Katie to investigate the bump and find out if it's legitimate or not, and also trying to reassure Donna that it's just the cops fishing and it's nothing to worry about. The bump is an actual recorded example of how this defendant acts when he is threatened by a purported extortionist. And how he acts is the complete opposite of how he's telling y'all he acted in the first extortion. Number one, he does not stay quiet about the bump. He talks about it a lot. There are multiple calls with Donna and Katie discussing the bump and what the next step should be. Two, he takes action. There are multiple in-person meetings with his mom and with Katie and eventually with his dad too about the bump and what to do about it. Three, he investigates the bump. He asks questions. He enlists Mag Banois to find out who this is. He talks a lot about his concerns that this will not be just a one-time payment but could turn into some ongoing problem. And four, he doesn't take it lying down. He threatens Nazi shit if these people think they can threaten his family and get away with it. He suggests that the problem might require an additional murder. Quote, if he can't do it, I'll find someone else that can. Number five, he's suspicious. He does not blindly accept the representations of this purported blackmailer that approached his mother. It's clear from the Dolce meeting that he doesn't fully trust Katie. He certainly doesn't trust this purported blackmailer that bumped into his mom. The person that represented themselves, the person that approached his mom represented himself as a Latin King gang member, right? I'm a brother of this guy that I met in Broward or whatever. And he's demanding money from her. Yet, the defendant does not take his word for it that he's a gang member. He's not so in fear for his mother's life that he opens the safe and gets $5 grand more out and gives it to Katie. A pittance compared to the amount he's telling you he handed out to the first layer of extortion. Number six, he doesn't pay. He doesn't bring the $5 grand to Dolce and give it to Katie and say, go pay it. Because that's what I do when I'm threatened, I pay. He doesn't pay, he doesn't ever pay. And it's only $5 grand. Instead, he analyzes and thinks through and talks about every possible scenario. Defendant says it's one of two things, or one of two scenarios. One being the cops, two being someone actually trying to blackmail his family about this murder. According to him now, he's been blackmailed for 2 years. And he's talking to Catherine Magbano. He's talking to the person that's been collecting his money all those months. But at no point does he acknowledge the first extortion in the Dolce Vita meeting. Why not? Oh, because she asked me not to talk about it. Well, times have changed. There's a second extortion effort now, and they're approaching my mother. You think I'm not going to mention the first extortion? Your people have been running their mouths, and now they've tracked down my mother. You need to go get this under control. Nothing like that. Next in the Dolce recording, defendant begins to explain how to prove a crime. The police have to put the person at the scene, not just in the car. He's reassuring her that even if we, law enforcement, can tie her or the shooters to the Prius, that we'll never be able to charge them. Because they didn't come to Tallahassee, they didn't shoot anyone, they didn't do anything wrong, and therefore they can't be held accountable. But that is not the law as the judge has instructed you. Everyone who wanted this done and did some act toward accomplishing it is guilty as the one that pulled the trigger. He's also telling her that even if Rivera has run his mouth to this would-be extortionist, his word alone that, hey, if he goes to the cops and starts singing and says, hey, Rivera told me he did this murder, that's not going to be enough. Basically, he didn't use the word hearsay, but that's not going to be enough to proceed on an arrest in this case. This person knows information, so Katie, they'll be back. Whoever it is knows information. Information about what? You had nothing to do with it. Remember that, doctor? You've been extorted and that hasn't been reported. What information do they have? You mean information that could be used to solve the murder of your former brother-in-law? If so, why wouldn't you want those people to go to the cops? Why wouldn't you want them to come forward with that information? Then the guilty parties will be held accountable. Your extortionist will be jailed without you having to do or risk anything. Next, defendant talks about what will happen if the would-be extortionist, the undercover, is picked up by law enforcement. Next thing you know, this person is singing. Other people start singing. As soon as they have him, he starts calling your name out, and then there's going to be police at your door and at my door. If you're innocent of this murder, why are you worried about the extortionist telling law enforcement whatever it is he knows about the murder of Dan Markell? Defendant says he wants to pay the money. Oh, got ahead of myself. He wants to pay the money, but he's explaining to her the problem with paying is that people might keep coming back or tell their friends who will jump on board as well. He's explaining to her the problems with paying a potential extortionist. What he doesn't say, which is what you would expect if he'd been getting extorted for 2 years, is Garcia, or whoever you've been giving my money to, has obviously been running their mouths, and now they are messing with my mother. Next, he gives instructions. Say my friends have no idea what you're talking about. And frankly, I don't know what you're talking about, but the name sounds familiar of who's incarcerated. So I'm going to give you something as charity to help the less fortunate. But do not contact these people again or they're going to the police. The whole time you're talking, just say, I don't know what's going on. Only use the words help and charity. This isn't the guy described in this first extortion who just rolled over when threatened. He's in control. He's giving the orders. He's giving instructions. Why would you have to give instructions to a blackmailer about how to handle a blackmailer? Next, the defendant says, now he's fucking with his wife, and he's fucking with him, and you fuck with the king himself, you better kill him, because he's going to be a big problem. And he knows who you are. If he can't do it, I'll have someone else do it. Defendant testified that this means the only way to stop Garcia is to kill him. He's not talking about killing him. He's just saying he's a really bad dude, and that's the only way to kill him. The evidence shows that he's saying if Garcia can't handle the undercover, he'll get somebody else to do it. Then he says, and so help me God, if they fuck with my family, it's gonna be fucking Nazi shit, because this will be done. I mean, Katie, I don't care what I spend, okay? I swear to God. Defendant and I went back and forth on the stand about what Nazi shit might include, and I think we ultimately agreed that that would be killing. And then he says, I don't care what I have to spend. If you're struggling to figure out who this man is, that's a good clue right there. He's going to buy a solution to this problem exactly how he paid for a solution to the problem of Danny Markel. Here he wants to know if Garcia has any bad feelings toward him, meaning, is Garcia willing to look into this and handle this for me? Or does he still hate me because I used to date you? If defendant had really been getting extorted all along, surely he'd say something like, I've been paying all this money, I've been compliant with everything. Can you get him to look into this and figure this out? Katie, I'll go to the moon and back for you. Why? Because she did something big for him, and he's going to be indebted to her for the rest of his life. Not because he feels sorry for her, not because she's his protector. He's the protector. He'll go to the moon and back for her because they're neck deep in this conspiracy together. Somebody messes with her, they mess with him. Somebody messes with him, they're messing with her. It's the same thing. Here he's demonstrating an understanding of, a rational understanding of how blackmail works. His example is that you could blackmail someone that's cheating on their wife, meaning you blackmail someone that you have dirt on. You don't go kill somebody and then go up to an innocent person and say, I killed your brother-in-law, give me money. At the end of the conversation, defendant says, you know who this is coming from? Inside. And then I don't have a slide for this, but he goes on to talk about what he will do for her. I don't have to sit here and tell you what I would do. I show you what I could do. You know what I'm saying? You know how I am. I look for things to do. You don't ask me for shit. Didn't she ask you for $138,000 and then a payment plan and then another $195,000? You don't ask me for shit. I look for things to do for you. Is that a statement that would be made to his blackmailer, or at least the woman that's taking the money to the blackmailers? These are just a selection of the incriminating quotes on this Dolce Vita recording, and I know it's a struggle to listen to it. You will have the recording, not the transcripts, but you'll have all the audios. The transcripts are just demonstratives, they don't go back. But you can kind of hunker down and listen as much as you can to get what you can out of that Dolce recording, because it is full of gems, and you can probably think of 10 more arguments than the ones I've just tortured you with today. In the initial recordings, the defendant and Magbanua seem to be kind of dancing around the issue, right? Nobody ever speaks directly. He can't know for sure at this point that she's not involved in the extortion effort or possibly wearing a wire, and she can't know for sure that he's not wearing a wire. So they're both just feeling each other out in the first several interactions after the bump. But those are the best stuff before they start to figure out, okay, we really think this is law enforcement. After the meeting with Magbanua, defendant calls Donna and tells her he had coffee with a friend and gave her some good relationship advice. Now remember, he's not talking in code. He assures Donna repeatedly that it's being handled and there's nothing to worry about. Then we hear in call H, the call where Magbanua calls Garcia and he's really angry. And she needs him to call that number to figure out who this is and to deal with it. Ultimately, Garcia says he will take care of the problem. The less she knows, the better. And then he tells her to stop talking about it on the phone and hangs up. Then we go to this. That's that. Then we've got the real struggle over the phone number. The point of this is that this number was handed to Donna. The number goes from Donna to Charlie, to Katie, and now to Garcia. Here in call J, we hear the reference to investment as code for the $5,000 extortion payment. A good investment would be someone who really does know something, not somebody that's just fishing, and will agree that 5,000 is going to handle it. You're going to go away, you're going to be silent about whatever you know, 5,000 is going to do it. A bad investment would be someone who's just read the papers and decided, hey, I'm going to try this, a law enforcement officer, or somebody that's going to take the 5,000 and then just keep coming back for more and more and more and more, and it'll be a continuous problem. This is a composite slide of all the places in the recordings that are in evidence where the parties express concerns about the details that the undercover had. It's getting too detailed. He's coming up with a lot of fucking details, etc. It's obvious they're analyzing the legitimacy of the undercover and assessing how much of a threat he is based on the quantity and the quality of the details that he has about the killing of Dan Markel. Then you've got more property and listing, code talk, more concern that the blackmailer might try to increase the amount. Here's a composite slide illustrating all the different calls where the defendant expresses concern that if he pays, that might not be the end of it. And the reason why I think this is so important is because you've been paying for 2 years. Why are you analyzing how blackmail goes or might go so much? You're supposedly an expert in it. Here, defendant gets stern with Catherine Magbanua, telling her to find out who the F it is and stop playing their games. Again, for a guy that's living in mortal fear of Latin King gang members, he's pretty confident. He's pretty in control. Recall that in this one call, she basically says, I can't, she's really furious in this call. She's like, I can't do all this code anymore. I can't talk in code. Remember, defendant told you he didn't talk in code on the wire. So she breaks character here in this call, BB. Then defendant later says to her the quote I already gave you about how they're in this together. They're one and the same. And I couldn't agree more with that statement. This slide is a composite of all the places where defendant says if he had information about the murder, he would collect the reward money. First of all, whichever side of this case, whichever theory you're finding credible, both sides agree that the defendant knew the whole time who killed Dan Markel, or close to the whole time. So definitely could have gone and gotten the reward money, although it's hard to imagine he would collect reward money for information about the death of his own loved one. Defendant claims he doesn't go to the police, period. And he offers an example of I had a jet ski stolen and I didn't go to the police. Well, maybe the insurance was worth more than the trouble with the cops. I don't know. But he has gone to the police before. There was evidence of that. And the evidence shows that when somebody messes with him, he comes at them with everything he has. On the lawsuit with Ryan Fitzpatrick, the incident with his child's mother, incident with an old roommate, incident with a former female employee, some of those included reports to law enforcement. Some of them included use of other resources. In the last case with the female employee, he sent a letter that said, he accused her of trying to shake him down. So she's trying to extort him. And it states that he would never pay her a dime. In fact, I'm going to get attorney's fees. He's a guy with considerable resources, and he's not a shrinking violet. He is not afraid to use those resources to his advantage. If some street thug was trying to push him around, do you think he'd lay down and take that without doing one thing about it? This slide is a composite of some of the occasions defendant mentions the option of going to the police. And these quotes are specifically in reference to him saying, if you're threatened, you go to the police. If you're threatened, you go to the police. And he has done that before, but he did not go to the police in this case. He didn't go to the police in 2014, not out of fear, as he would have you believe, but because he did this crime. He believed he had gotten away with this crime. He didn't go in 2015 because he was busy that year having the best year of his life. Financially, got in a serious relationship with a new girl, June Mchinda, cruises the intercoastal in his boat. This dude had solved the problem. Everyone was happy. Wendy and the boys were back in South Florida where they belonged. Mom was happy. He was making money hand over fist. June described the beginning of their relationship. June Umchinda described the beginning of her relationship with this defendant in October of 15 as a fairy tale. He is not sweating anything, folks. And that continued until the time of the bump in this case in April 2016, whereby the defendant became agitated, angry, and anxious. This was before the report concerning him was leaked. At the time of the bump, his behavior changed noticeably. June noticed it, and Ryan Fitzpatrick noticed it as well. He was erratic. Now, why on earth would he be more stressed out after his extortionists were arrested? He seemed perfectly fine to these witnesses when he would have you believe he was in fear for his life. And then he further told you that he was more nervous after the arrest because he feared he'd be falsely arrested. Why? You didn't do anything wrong, you're not going to get arrested. Now, yeah, after the report gets leaked, okay, but why are you so nervous before that? Or were you a hot mess because you knew that we were getting closer? Here's Catherine McBanois and the defendant discussing if the undercover could be someone who's trying to be an informant. An informant for what, if not the death of Dan Markell? He's not going to be an informant on the defendant getting extorted, a crime he has not reported. Here they're talking about whether the undercover is getting his information from the inside or the outside. The inside meaning someone within the murder conspiracy, someone on that board, or the outside, somebody that one of those people told. McBanois says it can only be one of two, apparently. If somebody's that desperate, not from the inside, because there's too much from the inside that the person knows from the outside, so they won't risk it. That's why I know for a fact it's not from the inside. And then Adelson says, it's somebody not from the first layer, but probably the second layer. Yeah, and they just made a big mistake, she says. As the wire goes on and the defendant proceeds to continue to analyze the additional bump efforts that law enforcement makes, that text message, the letter, the call to the Adelson Institute, he becomes increasingly confident that this would-be extortionist is an undercover agent. And then after listening to Donna's call to the undercover, he is completely sure of that. And you have never seen anybody so elated to be under investigation by the FBI for first-degree murder. Consider this in light of defendant's assertions that he was acting strangely after the bump because he was worried about being falsely arrested. To the contrary, he doesn't seem worried at all. He seems thrilled. I think he says it's fantastic in one of these calls. I want to turn briefly to your jury instructions. The defendant is charged with conspiracy to commit murder, solicitation to commit murder, and first-degree murder. Why all three? Because the defendant didn't just ask Catherine McBanois to do this and promise her money. He didn't just set a plan of action in place toward doing it. It got done. It got done, and that's what makes it a murder. That's the difference between just conspiring. You didn't just conspire. It got done. This is the difference between just soliciting or just conspiring and being a principal to first-degree murder. To prove the crime of first-degree murder, I must prove to you that this was premeditated. Premeditation is defined as killing after consciously intending to do so. This murder, consciously deciding to do so. All right, so this murder was in the works for over a year. It began with the failed relocation efforts. When defendant first looked into hiring a hitman, it took root when he enlisted Catherine McBanois, and she thereby brought in Garcia and Rivera to do the killing. The planning that went into the killing was extensive, spanning over a year, and it included the solicitation of McBanois to find someone to do the murder, the preparation of that letter and that envelope that were placed in Catherine McBanois' diaper bag, free of DNA or prints containing the directions for a murder that was delivered to the hired gun, Secreto Garcia. 3, the payments that were made in advance for renting the vehicles in the hotel room, the expenses associated with those trips. That was part of the planning. 4, the scouting and stalking of Professor Markel that we learned went on in both trips. And 5, the pressure that defendant applied to Catherine Magbanua after that first attempt failed. Get it done, get it done, get it done. 6, of course, is the payment itself. He paid for it. All the planning, all the meetings, all the precautions were coming to fruition when that hired gun fired those 2 shots that devastated so many lives on July 18th, 2014. When you think about how this case was proven, we started at a single point, the crime scene, and we went in 2 totally different directions. We chased the Prius, and we chased the motive, the bad blood of the in-laws. And the investigation could have stalled if either of these leads had resulted in a dead end. But all the little breadcrumbs led to the same place. The Prius led to Garcia and Rivera, which led to Magbanua. The bad blood and the divorce led to the Adelson family. The wire confirmed the defendant's specific involvement, not just some Adelson, that Adelson. Then Rivera and eventually Magbanua confirmed his involvement as well. I want to spend a moment talking about the principal instruction. We talked about this in jury selection. The defendant didn't pull the trigger, but that doesn't mean he isn't just as responsible as the person who did. Without every player in this conspiracy, the murder doesn't get done. In your jury instructions, it says there are 2 ways to prove defendant's guilt under the law of principles. If he intended that the murder be done and he did some act, preparing the paper, procuring Magbanua, or said some word, get it done, get it done, get it done, that caused or helped another to commit the crime, then he is guilty of first-degree murder. Or, 2 ways you can find it. Or, if he intended the murder to be done, and he made or promised payment in exchange for the murder, and the crime was committed by another person, he's guilty of first-degree murder. My burden today is to prove to you this case beyond a reasonable doubt. The jury instructions tell you that a reasonable doubt is not a mere possible doubt, a speculative, imaginary, or forced doubt. So when you're stuck back there deliberating, ask yourself, what is reasonable? When you're weighing a piece of evidence and deciding, is this a doubt or not? Is it reasonable? Does it fit with the other evidence in the case? If you find yourself saying, what if, or a fellow juror is saying, what if, without evidence to support whatever it is that comes after the what if, that's speculation. Remind your fellow jurors to get back on track. And that cannot be a reasonable doubt if it's speculation. My burden is to prove the elements of the listed offenses. Nothing more. If you have a question that I have failed to prove the answer to, but it's not one of these elements of the crime that the judge has given you, that is not a reasonable doubt. I'm concerned that you'll get back there and think, well, he didn't pull the trigger, so let's just do conspiracy and solicitation. You guys have worked too hard to render a compromised verdict at this point. I trust that each of you will follow the law and your oath to render a wise and legal verdict in this case. This defendant is guilty of first-degree murder under the principal theory, if ever anyone has been. So the efforts to distract you from this case and what it's really about, including these clear links in this conspiracy and all the evidence that establishes them, the text, the calls, the records, the testimony of Rivera, the testimony of Magbanua, all those things together. The wiretap, the phone calls, the iCloud messages, and the absence of any other reasonable explanation should all lead you to one conclusion. This is the puzzle. This is the puzzle. The image is clear. When I confronted Rivera with the defense theory that he and Garcia acted alone to kill Markel and then extorted money out of the dentist through Magbanoa, he found it laughable. I wrote down his quote, "Huh, that's a good one." It came out in this trial that in Garcia's trial, Rivera was portrayed as the sole killer, the bad guy. He conspired directly with Charlie Adelson, according to Garcia, to commit the murder through WhatsApp or some kind of way. Garcia's lawyers said this was all done without the knowledge and participation of Garcia. Then we learned in Magbanoa's trial, Garcia supposedly conspired directly.
Objection, Your Honor. Approach.
Now, here we are in the trial of Charlie Adelson, and the truth has been revealed. Once again, the state got this almost right. That's what you heard in the opening from Mr. Rashbaum. We understandably thought that his client, Mr. Adelson, was the hirer of this murder, but there's a twist. Nothing is as it appears to be. The defendant is really the second victim in all of this. Per his theory, the killers drove to Miami twice to kill someone they'd never met and had no motive to kill, in hopes that Charlie Adelson would, 1, not report them for murder, and 2, would instead agree to give them large amounts of cash at that time and on a payment plan over the next, years. Other than failing the smell test, there are a few specific problems with the defense theory. 1, how would the killers have known where to go to kill Markel? How would they know who to kill? How could the killers have known that Dan Markel was scheduled to leave town the day after the murder? 3, possibly the biggest problem, the theory itself makes no sense. Were they just hoping that this would work? We're going to go all the way up there and kill somebody, and maybe he'll give us some money. If they were going to confess to doing the murder to Charlie Adelson in order to try to get money, why not just put a gun to his head and take his money? Why not just rob and or extort him with the threat of death by Latin King? That would save you the trip and the murder rap. Their jigsaw puzzle theory is just a pile of pieces that don't fit together. Each explanation is carefully designed to explain one piece of evidence. But how many different explanations can you string together before it's no longer reasonable? How many coincidences can there be before it's no longer a coincidence? This defendant is not a victim. He's a criminal. He's wealthy, he's smart, and he's successful. But he's a wealthy, smart, successful murderer. My work is almost done here, and yours is just beginning. I trust that each of you will do your best to render a wise and legal verdict in this case. A verdict that speaks the truth. A just verdict. And that is a verdict of guilty as charged. Thank you.
Okay, so there you have it. Apparently, Charlie was very confident in the aftermath of this as he was waiting for the verdict. It did not take long for the verdict to come in, so I just want to show you guys Charlie hearing the verdict. Just to put a full stop on this portion of the tale.
Has the jury reached a unanimous verdict?
Yes, Your Honor.
If you please could hand the verdict form to the bailiff. The The verdict form is in its proper order. Madam Clerk, please publish the verdict.
In the Circuit Court of the Second Judicial Circuit in and for Leon County, Florida, the state of Florida versus Charles Adelson, case number 2016 CF 3036B, verdict. Count 1. We, the jury, find as follows as to count 1 of the indictment, first-degree murder. The defendant is guilty of first-degree murder. Count 2. We, the jury, find as follows as to count 2 of the indictment, conspiracy to commit first-degree murder. The defendant is guilty of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder. Count 3. We, the jury, find as follows as to count 3 of the indictment, solicitation to commit first-degree murder. The defendant is guilty of solicitation to commit first-degree murder. So say we all this 6th day of November, 2023.
Does the defense wish for the court to poll the jurors?
Yes, Your Honor.
Juror Moore, was your verdict and the verdict of the jury as a whole just announced?
Yes.
Juror Brazos, was your verdict and the verdict of the jury as a whole just announced?
It was.
Juror Gardner, was your verdict and the verdict of the jury as a whole just announced?
Yes.
Juror Strong, was your verdict and the verdict of the jury as a whole just announced?
Yes, sir.
Juror Kraft, was your verdict and the verdict of the jury as a whole just announced?
Yes, Your Honor.
Juror Milne, was your verdict and the verdict of the jury as a whole just announced?
Yes, sir.
Juror Hawley, was your verdict and the verdict of the jury as a whole just announced?
Yes, sir.
Juror Thorne, discussions and votes should remain a private affair for as long as they wish it. Therefore, the law gives you a unique privilege not to speak about the jury's work. The lawyers and their representatives are not permitted to initiate any communication with.
There you go. Apparently his attorney, his defense attorney, Daniel Roshbaum, who's actually going to be representing Donna in her upcoming trial, the family attorney, he'd actually told Charlie that his chances were good. He was very confident as he was waiting for this. But it was not to be. Hey, Crystal. All right, guys. So I know that was quite lengthy, but I thought it was worth showing the whole closing argument there because it really summarizes the case so well, and it's good to have that reminder. Okay, so that's all I've got for tonight. Thanks everyone that was in here, and I hope to cover this case again. I'm going to go through some of the testimony from Katie McBanowa, especially, and perhaps some of the back and forth between Charlie and Georgia, which is pretty interesting to watch. And I'm sure we'll talk about Sarah Boone again, and perhaps a few other true crime cases coming up. So have a good week, everyone, and I shall see you around the tubes. Good night. And thanks again to Cheryl for coming up.